Chapter 651. Thank you. I'll visit you again in the evening. Yorko stared at them in astonishment, wondering if they had made a mistake. He was the ambassador of Grey Castle. After Otto left, before he could question him, Hill interrupted him with one sentence. This is also what His Majesty hopes for. Yorko put his hand on his forehead and asked, "Are you sure? I represent Grey Castle. If the King of Dawn knows about this, the relationship between the two countries will return to the previous situation. What should we do then?" Let's not talk about whether Appen Moya has time to care about such a trivial matter. Even if he finds out, witches are more important than the Covenant, Hill said solemnly. In fact, when we were selecting the slaves, my men had been secretly observing whether there were any witches among the refugees. What's the result? Nothing. He shook his head and said, either there are no witches among the refugees, or they're well hidden and have completely integrated into the local people. In short, if you can bring a witch back for His Majesty, he'll definitely reward you handsomely. You know how much His Majesty values them. Hearing that it was a request from his old friend, Yorko agreed with a bitter face. Forget it, I'll just take it as an eye-opener, he comforted himself. He was also curious about what kind of slaves were sold there since even Denise was not qualified to go there. In the evening, Otto showed up at the gate of the mansion on time. Yorko followed him into a luxurious carriage without any emblem. In addition to a thick fluffy carpet, there were 2 chains hanging down from the roof. It was obvious what they were used for at first glance. I didn't expect you to have such a hobby. Yorko whistled. Ahem, this isn't my carriage. Otto blushed slightly. Only this kind of carriage is suitable to cover people's eyes and ears while keeping them in place. You don't have to explain. I understand. He curiously touched the wristband under the chain and said, when this is over, can I borrow the carriage for a few days? Of course. It's just a rental fee of 50 silver royals a day, including the coachman. After Otto told the coachman his destination, he found a comfortable place and lay down. It's a bit far, so you can take a rest. How long will it take? About an hour ago, on the outskirts of the city of Glow. Does that mean we can't come back today? Yorko asked in surprise. The city gate will be closed after the sun sets, right? Black money provides shelter and food. In fact, all the services you can buy in the city of Glow are provided there. It sounds like a market. Pretty much. The only difference is that it's built underground. Otto explained, I've only been there once, so I don't know if the bidding process has changed. But as long as you follow the guide, there shouldn't be any problem. After you bid for the witch, you don't need to wait until the end of the exhibition. You can directly go backstage to get the witch, and then there will be attendants who will arrange a room for you. Wait. Yorko looked at him in surprise. Aren't you going in with me? There's only one invitation. What about the money? This black letter is money. Otto smiled. Holding it is equivalent to being recognized by the Chamber of Commerce. You only need to quote a price. Is there no upper limit? Yorko widened his eyes. Of course there is, but it's much higher than the price of a witch. According to the information I gathered, a witch was auctioned for about 1,000 gold coins a few years ago. Now that His Majesty Appen has ordered to eliminate witches, the final price should be lower. 8,000 golden dragon coins. Yorko was speechless. This group of upper-class nobles did not take money seriously. Even if they visited all the famous brothels in King City, they would not spend so much money. Was it because his level was too low and he had never been exposed to those really expensive games? Besides, in order to gain her trust, you'd better not touch her. Otto coughed twice. After all, she's not a real slave. Otherwise, it may cause trouble on the way. Of course I understand that. Yorko sighed. That was the person His Majesty wanted. He would rather die than touch her. Anyway, remember to put a hood on her when you come out. We'll meet again tomorrow morning. The carriage drove out of the city gate and rushed all the way to the west. It did not slow down until the yellow afterglow was completely swallowed by the curtain of night. About the same as Otto's estimation, they arrived at their destination an hour later. The exhibition venue looked no different from an ordinary house at first glance. There was a spacious yard surrounded by crooked fences. A mud house made of mud and straw stood in the middle. Behind the yard was a bare farmland. The wheat had been harvested, leaving only bundles of wheat straws that looked like lumps growing out of the earth. The only eye-catching thing was that there were many swaying torches in the farmland. It was obvious that someone was guarding nearby. Moreover, there would not be a sentry post in front of the courtyard of an ordinary house. After checking the invitation, Otto and the accompanying guards all stayed outside the yard. Yorko followed the guide into the mud house and walked down the wooden ladder in the middle of the hall. After passing through a man-made narrow passage, he walked into a natural karst cave. The cave was almost half the size of the king's city square. With the flickering light of the torches, he could see many dark holes on both sides of the cave, which led to an unknown place. The ground at the bottom of the cave had been polished and paved with flat tiles. Only the stalactites hanging overhead could show the original appearance of the place. Many people had gathered here and seemed to be waiting for the exhibition to begin. Yorko finally understood what Otto meant by not so formal. Judging from the scene, it was really not much different from a gathering of mice. "Sir, this way please." The guide led him to the seat marked on the black letter and sat down beside him. "I'll be at your service throughout the exhibition. If you have any questions about the products, you can ask me." As she spoke, she pressed her soft chest against Yorko's arm. In the dim light, he could see her sharp chin and rosy lips under the mask. "Is this also a kind of service?" He stretched his elbow impolitely. "What's your name?" "Of course, sir. You can call me number 76. She spoke with a sweet voice, but her answer was not flustered at all. Well, he took back what he had said. Mice could never train such a servant. If every bidder had a guide, just the cost alone would be enough to make people gasp in astonishment. "But is it always so dark here?" Yorko asked with raised eyebrows, enjoying the soft touch on his arm. "It's impossible to see the products on the stage clearly. You'll know soon." She chuckled. As if to prove what number 76 said, the sound of metal rubbing suddenly came from the top of the cave. Then, several iron chains slid down, each with a strange stone hanging at the end. The light they emitted was several times brighter than that of the torches. In an instant, the stand in front of Yorko was clearly illuminated. The chatter in the cave suddenly quieted down. Against the soft and bright light, the torches seemed even dimmer. The whole cave seemed to be plunged into darkness. The stand became the only source of light and also the focus of everyone's attention. A man in formal attire stepped onto the stand and bowed to the crowd. Chapter 652. What's that? Yorko stared at the glowing object in amazement, completely ignoring the dazzling light. Is it also sold in the exhibition? It has many names, such as sunstone, light crystal. But we prefer to call it magic stone, because we heard that it comes from the demon's lair, number 76 explained in a low voice. Black money has auctioned this kind of thing before, and the final price is between 2,000 and 3,000 golden dragon. It's not only expensive, but also very rare. It's not available in every exhibition. At least, there's no magic stone on the auction list tonight. She paused and asked, "Sir, is this your first time here?" Sort of." He touched his nose guiltily. If a single magic stone is worth so much, does it mean that the magic stone used to illuminate the stage is worth more than 10,000 golden dragon? That's too extravagant. The guide seemed to sense his uneasiness, so she took the initiative to approach him and whispered in his ear like a lover, "It's nothing, sir. Every guest who attends the underground exhibition for the first time will be shocked by the magic stone. This is also a way for black money to show off their ability. You're also one of their means, aren't you?" Yorko might not be as knowledgeable as those great noble families, but he was quite adept at treating women. Coupled with the guide's gentle and considerate tone, he effectively calmed down his emotions. He took the opportunity to put his arm around the woman's waist and pulled her into his arms. "Only if I can get your approval. I've already approved of you. After the exhibition. I'll still be at your service, sir." She nodded gently. Yorko began to like this place a little. He moved his eyes to the stage. 2 rounds of bidding had passed, But he did not even pay attention to what was being sold. The crowd around him did not respond well either, so it was obvious that it was not a good thing. This was similar to the exhibition that Denise had taken him to. The first few rounds were usually just appetizers, and the middle and later rounds were the main points. According to Otto's judgment, the witch's ranking this time shouldn't be too low. It should be around 700 or 800 gold royals. After all, for these businessmen, pure beauty was no longer of much interest to them. What they needed was excitement and novelty. It was not until the first living person was pushed onto the stage that there was a slight noise in the crowd. It was a woman. She looked ordinary, and apart from her good complexion, there was nothing special about her. In addition, Yorko noticed that unlike the slave market, where the goods for sale were usually stripped naked, she was wrapped tightly from head to toe. She wore a gorgeous robe that only the nobles could afford. She was dressed like a lady from a rich family. What kind of trick is this? He pinched number 70's waist. Disguising slaves as nobles can raise the auction price. Not to disguise the slaves as nobles, but the slaves of nobles, the guide corrected him with a smile. Is there a difference between the two? Yorko suddenly widened his eyes. What did you say? She is a nobleman. Number 76 made a gesture to whisper, not a distant relative or a branch, but a direct descendant of a big family, the legal heir. Sirs, do you see this young lady? The host said loudly, Avni Tanfiken, the daughter of the earl from the gravel forest of the kingdom of Wolfheart. Of course, since her father died in the war with the church, according to the law, she is the new earl of Gravel Forest. The Tanfiken family can be traced back to 300 years ago, and they are also quite famous in the kingdom of Wolfheart. However, compared to the family history, I believe that the incident of the Emerald Stone 20 years ago is more memorable. Now is a good opportunity to repay the Tanfiken family. The lowest price is 300 golden dragon. Interested parties, please bid. 310. Someone immediately shouted, 350 golden dragon. I bid 400. You are crazy. Looking at the rising price, Yorko said in disbelief, selling real nobles as slaves? No matter in which country, this is an unforgivable felony. There was an unwritten rule among the nobles that the continuation of the bloodline was more important than anything else, and anyone who hindered it was the common enemy of the nobles. Therefore, it became a tacit rule to pay ransom after losing the war. Even if they temporarily lost power, as long as the bloodline could continue, they could rise again at any time, especially the royal nobles, which had not changed for hundreds of years. This exhibition was a blatant challenge to the entire noble class. As long as it's not publicized, number 76 spread out her hands and said, people won't blame black money for the extinction of the nobles. After all, it was the church that caused all this. What will happen to these nobles in the end? You said they will repay, right? The guide could not help but burst into laughter. At that time, the Tanfiken family maliciously lowered the price of the emerald stone, which made many gem merchants suffer. Of course, the repayment will be cruel. But from the beginning, they are destined to never see the light of day again, and they are no different from witches. The next few bidders were all nobles from the kingdom of Everwinter and the kingdom of Wolfheart. There were both men and women, and the male servants were older and more popular. Compared to the heirs, the merchant women probably preferred the real nobles with rich experience. Yorko finally understood what Otto meant by inconvenient to see the light of day, and the reason why the audit was so strict. Perhaps, in addition to wealth and family background, the intention to buy was also very important. In other words, the people who could be brought in by black money were all potential buyers, and they were all in the same boat. In the 10th round of bidding, Yorko's target of this trip finally appeared. He had to admit that even though she was tightly bound, her appearance was still better than that of the noble women in the previous rounds. Her long brown hair was scattered messily on her shoulders, and her coarse linen clothes were somewhat thin in this season. Several whip marks could be seen on her bare hands and feet. Obviously, she had suffered a lot after being caught. Although she looked a little haggard, her beautiful facial features and lively temperament could not be concealed. A refugee witch from the kingdom of Wolfheart. She doesn't have a name, and her ability is to use the power of the devil to heal herself. Thank you for your report. This kind of opportunity is rare. Think about it, there are many ways to play with a witch who can continuously recover her body. If you think raising a witch is troublesome, black money can also do it for you. The lowest price is 500 golden dragon. Interested parties, please bid. The host shouted. 510, 560, 600 golden dragon. Yorko did not immediately bid. He knew that only when the price was close to stabilizing would the number he shouted have the final effect. However, something unexpected happened. The final price of 800 golden dragon that Otto had predicted was quickly exceeded. Soon, the bidding broke through the 1,000 mark, and there was no sign of it stopping. Chapter 653. The problem might lie in the witch's ability. Yorko realized that the eldest son of the Luashi family had only heard about the sale of the witch, but had neglected the factor of the witch's ability. The dangerous and strange ability would obviously lower the price of the witch. After all, no one wanted to lose their life because of a careless mistake. After all, the witches were all extraordinary people. Whether they were the devil's minions or not, it would always be risky to play with them. However, the witch's ability did not sound scary. The self-healing ability could not hurt others and could satisfy the needs of some curiosity hunters, so the price was much higher than expected. Sir, won't you bid? Number 76 took the initiative to speak for the first time. Wait. Yorko wiped the sweat off his hands. Although Otto said that the black letter was money, how much was it worth? 1,000 golden dragon or 2,000? Would black money recognize the price if the limit was exceeded? What if he had to pay for the gap? A series of questions poured into his mind, making it difficult for him to breathe. He could not even take out 100 golden dragon, let alone 1,000. At this time, the bidding had gradually stabilized. The limit of each increase was about 10 golden dragon, and the interval was getting slower and slower. 1,260. Is there any higher price? Yorko knew that he would lose the chance to win the witch if he did not say anything. He gritted his teeth. If the price exceeded the limit, he would show his identity as the ambassador of Grey Castle. They would not hurt an ambassador and wait until the next morning for Otto to pay. 1,500 golden dragon, he said in a low voice. Yes. Number 76 immediately raised her right hand. 1,500. There was a burst of discussion among the audience. It was obvious that Yorko was determined to win the witch by raising the price by nearly 300. This way of bidding not only showed the attitude of the seller, but also gave other bidders a way out. After all, those who could get the invitation letter of black money were the group of people who were at the peak of wealth or power. Maintaining a good relationship was more important than a purely playful commodity. If it was not something irreplaceable, generally people would not continue to compete. This was also the bidding method that Yorko learned from Denise. He hoped to use this method to make other bidders back off. But his hope was soon disappointed. 1,800. In less than a few breaths of time, a new bid sounded from the crowd. Yorko's heart suddenly sank. This meant that the other party was just as determined to get it as he was. Your Excellency? Number 76 reminded. 2,000. Yorko gritted his teeth. 2,300. Not long after the guide bid, the other side continued to raise the price. Damn it, even if it was for the self-healing ability, the price was too ridiculous. In the slave market, a beautiful and skillful female slave would not be worth more than 100 golden dragons. He could buy a dozen of them and do whatever he wanted without worrying about violating the laws of the Kingdom of Dawn. Wasn't it more suitable than a witch? He also noticed that the guide for the other party was a man. The guide is determined according to the bidder's gender, right? Yorko said angrily, so that guy is a woman? She doesn't have the skills I have, so why would she buy a witch to look at? Unless the customer has special needs, it will be as you said. Number 76 nodded and said, do you want to continue to increase the price? 200 every time, until she gives up. At this point, Yorko was ready to risk everything. He did not believe that the other party could be more powerful than the three big families of the Kingdom of Dawn. Anyway, it was Otto who asked him to do it. As the two people competed with each other, the people around them began to whisper to each other. Obviously, they were very interested in this good show. When the price soared to 4,000, the other party finally stopped bidding. But the price was 5 times higher than Otto's expectation. 4,000 going once. Twice. The host's unhurried tone made Yorko extremely worried. He wished he could rush up and hit the small hammer to decide the price on behalf of the host. Fortunately, the nightmarish bid did not come again. 3 times. Sold. Yorko heaved a sigh of relief and leaned against the bench. His back was a little wet. 4,000 golden dragons. It was a fortune that he could never touch in his life, but now he was willing to spend it all for a witch. Was this how the nobles spent their money? He suddenly felt that his days in King City were all in vain. The so-called enjoying the scenery was just a joke in the eyes of the big families and rich businessmen. "Congratulations, Your Excellency," the guide said with a smile. "Item number 10 is yours." The people around him also looked at him with respect. No matter what, it was worthy of respect to spend 4,000 golden dragons for a short-term consumable item. In the Kingdom of Dawn, wealth was a symbol of status. Ignoring the anxiety and worry during the bidding process, Yorko now felt as sweet as honey. For the first time, he tasted the feeling of being the center of attention. It was not the contempt or perfunctory attitude that he was used to, but the attention of a big shot. "Are the next auction items all slaves?" Yorko asked after he savored it enough. "Not the last one," number 76 replied. "I heard it's a very rare treasure that Black Money spent a lot of effort to get." "Even you don't know?" "The boss said it would be more mysterious," she said helplessly. "He only told us that it was a relic with a magic stone embedded in it. So it can shine?" Yorko twitched his mouth. "You said there was no magic stone on the list." "There are more than one kind of magic stone. Some stones can't shine, but they're the best jewels," number 76 explained. "For example, the Blue Star, which was auctioned at 3,400 golden dragons half a year ago, is a magic stone that can't shine. But if you put it in the dark, you can see that there are countless stars twinkling inside it. It's not comparable to ordinary jewels." The price was also higher than that of ordinary jewels. Yorko could not help but be curious about how beautiful it was that it could be sold at such a high price. Since he had done what Otto asked him to do, he would just take it as a learning experience, so that he could brag about it in front of Denise in the future. He finally waited for the last round of bidding, but the result was disappointing. It was a long sword. There were indeed 4 bright-colored gems inlaid on the hilt, but was the seller selling gems or weapons? The auctioneer boasted that it was found in an ancient relic in the impassable mountain range, and the murals around it showed that the long sword once belonged to an outstanding warrior. In her hands, the long sword could even trigger celestial phenomena, and her enemies were demons from hell. Yorko sneered at the auctioneer. "Maybe it's more practical to remove the gems and sell them separately." Obviously, the auctioneer made a mistake by using the slogan on the weapon. The starting price of 50,000 golden dragons made the audience burst into an uproar. In the end, no one bid, so the auction ended hastily. "Where's the witch I bought?" Yorko's mind was no longer on the exhibition. He touched number 76's thigh and asked in a low voice, "Has she been put in my room?" Chapter 654. Leaving the dark karst cave, the guide held Yorko's hand and walked to a small hole on the side wall with ease. Yorko could not even see the ground clearly, but number 70's footsteps were not slow at all. Moreover, he could feel that number 70's strength was not much weaker than his. There were a few raised calluses on her palms, which did not match her slender figure at all. Besides serving the guests, the underground exhibition also used her as a guard. It was not easy to train such a person. It would be great if he could buy one from Black Money. Hill Fox looked smart and capable, but after all, he was an old friend and would certainly not follow him forever. Moreover, he was a man, so it would be a little boring to be a guard. Obviously, it would be much more suitable for him to be number 76. Of course, Yorko was just thinking about it. After all, the black letter did not belong to him. 4,000 golden dragons had far exceeded Otto's expectation. If he added some for his own use, he was afraid that the Luashi family, one of the 3 big families, would immediately fall out with him, which would not be worth the loss. After entering those small holes, Yorko found that most of them were naturally formed channels. Due to the narrow terrain, the light of the torch was much brighter. Moreover, there were many shafts on the top of the cave, through which he could vaguely see the sky under the curtain of night. These crisscrossed paths led to the deeper karst caves. Some of them had been transformed into hotels, while others had signs with wine barrels on them. It looked like an underground town. It seemed that it was necessary to arrange a guide for the customers, otherwise it would take a long time just to find his room. By the way, how should I pay for the auction? Yorko asked in a low voice when there was no one around. After you confirm that the goods are safe, just give me the invitation letter before you leave the underground, number 76 answered with a smile. I'll handle the rest of the procedures for you. You can also visit our tavern, casino, and hot water baths. Whether it's for fun or relaxation, Black Money has the corresponding services. All the money will be recorded in the black letter? Yes. What if someone wants to buy a guide? You only need to pay 500 golden dragon to Black Money, number 76 answered smoothly as if she was used to this kind of question. Sir, do you want to buy me? Getting along isn't about the time, but the degree of pleasure. Yorko avoided the topic. What do you think? You're right. She couldn't help but chuckle. By the way, can I see your face? That won't do. Number 76 shook her head. Unless you buy the guide, he can't take off his mask in private. This is the rule of Black Money. But you said that any service is fine, of course. She touched her red lips, her words full of provocation. It doesn't stop me from dressing you, my lord. Yorko felt even more excited. Here we are. This is your room. Passing through many caves, number 76 led him to a wooden door embedded in the end of the cave. The door was engraved with the same number as her. The room is divided into 2 rooms. I'll sleep in the outer room tonight. You can call me if you need anything. After the door was opened, Yorko could not help but raise his eyebrows. This is the outer room? The karst cave behind the door was narrow at the front and wide at the back. The so-called outer room was only the length and width of one person. There was only a layer of straw on the ground. It was probably no different from a stable when sleeping. After all, it's underground. It's difficult to find so many suitable rooms. The guide waved his hand indifferently and then opened the second door for him. The inner room was not very spacious. Except for a big bed and 2 soft chairs, there was basically no room for anything else. Yorko walked into the room and saw the witch he bought at a glance. Her hands and feet were firmly fastened to the iron ring on the wall, and a piece of white silk was stuffed in her mouth. Seeing someone come in, she immediately panicked and struggled. The corner of his mouth twitched twice, and he immediately cursed Black Money in his heart. He thought that the residence would be divided into several compartments, and there would be a cage specially used to imprison slaves, but it turned out to be so simple and crude. How could he enjoy a long night with number 76? Perform a live erotic show in front of the witch? Spare him. This kind of behavior was probably worse than directly touching her. Yorko's frown deepened when he thought that Otto had asked him to gain the witch's trust as much as possible. Does Black Money have other rooms? I mean the ones that cost extra, he asked helplessly. Considering that some guests have higher requirements for bedrooms, we have semi-outdoor rooms closer to the ground and rooms close to the underground dark spring. Sure enough, when businessmen made money, it was simply outrageous. What's the cheapest one? 3 golden dragon for 1 night. Yorko thought that the price was almost enough to stay in a hotel in the inner city of the king's city for half a month. However, compared to 4,000 gold royals, this amount was not worth mentioning at all. Otto Luashi would just treat it as a service charge and would probably not mind. Go out and wait for me for a while, he said after thinking for a moment. I have something to talk with this witch. I'll call you when I'm done. Sir. Number 76 respectfully left the room. Yorko took off his coat and walked to the witch. The latter struggled more violently, with panic and fear in her eyes. He sighed and covered the witch with his coat. Listen, I'm asked to come here to get you out of here. No one will hurt you. As long as you don't make a fuss, everything is negotiable. Nod twice if you understand. The witch stopped struggling and stared at Yorko for a long time, as if she could not believe what she had heard. The ambassador had to repeat it again, speaking as slowly as possible. Although the witch was very beautiful, he did not like this kind of childish little girl. This time, she finally nodded. Yorko was relieved and reached out to pull the cloth out of the witch's mouth. "Who are you?" she asked after coughing twice. "A person who came to save you." Yorko returned to the bed and sat down. "Do you have a name?" "Amy." She paused. "Since you came to save me, why don't you let me go? What if you run away? If you're caught, I don't have another 4,000 golden dragon to buy you again." Yorko spread his hands and said, "For safety's sake, you'd better stay confined and not easily arouse suspicion. When we get out of here tomorrow, I'll set you free. What do you think?" "Really?" Amy asked doubtfully. She trusted others so easily. No wonder she was found and reported. He thought to himself, "Fortunately, I met her this time. She's lucky. Not only that, I'll also introduce you to a place where witches gather. There are many companions waiting for you there, so you don't have to hide all day." Yorko stood up. "So just wait until tomorrow. Do you understand?" "Wait, where are you going?" "To enjoy the sweet nightlife, of course." He grinned. Just when Yorko was about to call number 76, there was a sudden sound of messy footsteps in the outer room, followed by the dull sound of heavy objects hitting each other. Everything came and went quickly. Only a few breaths later, the room was quiet again. Chapter 655. Damn it. Yorko did not know what was going on outside, but he knew it was not a good thing. Black Money was an exhibition organized by the most powerful local businessmen. Except for the illegal auction items, everything else was the same as a regular exhibition. He cursed Otto 10,000 times in his heart. First, the auction price was wrong, and now someone came to him. If he had known this, he would not have agreed to it. Yorko looked around, trying to find something to defend himself with, but there was nothing in the room except some tools for torturing the slaves. Just then, the door of the inner room was pushed open and a figure flashed in. Yorko knelt down without hesitation. "Spare me. I'll give you whatever you want." But the person didn't stop at all. Instead, he leaped and pounced towards him. "Oh no." He subconsciously held his head and fell to one side, hoping to avoid the attack. "No, Annie," Amy shouted at the same time. Following the witch's voice, the cold wind that swept his cheeks suddenly stopped. Yorko looked sideways and found that it was a wooden stick, which seemed to be broken from a chair. If he were to be hit, he would probably be knocked unconscious immediately, which would be considered a light punishment. Then, he was grabbed by the arm by a big hand, lifted up, and pressed on the bed with his back to her. "Didn't he do anything to you?" The voice sounded a little hoarse, and it was difficult to tell whether it was a man or a woman. He said, "He came to save me." "You've been cheated again, Amy." The person shook her head, twisted Yorko's hands behind his back, and tied them up skillfully. "Spending 4,000 golden dragons to save a strange witch? This is not a small sum of money. Even your father would need to save up his entire life to accumulate so many gold royals." Is that so? He knew the auction price so well. Was he really the guy who competed with him? But at that time, the karst cave was dark except for the bright booth. How did this guy recognize him and follow him to room 76? Yorko knew that his life was at stake. This time, he did not lobby for his old friend or Otto, but to save himself. "I didn't lie to her. I'm the ambassador of Grey Castle, and it's the king's order to save the witch." Grey Castle's ambassador? Yorko knew it would work when he felt the hand on his back tremble slightly. "Yes, you've heard of Roland Wimbledon, haven't you? He's the fourth son of Wimbledon III, the king of Grey Castle, and he's very friendly to witches. He firmly believes that witches are no different from ordinary people. He even fought with the church to let witches live freely in his territory. It's all true, I swear. The visitor might not know who Roland was, but everyone in the city of Glow knew that the church in Grey Castle had suffered a crushing defeat at Coldwind Ridge. He even knew that the news was spread by Hill Fox and his helpers. The church had always been the #1 enemy of the witches. Those who could defeat the church, no matter for what reason, would most likely win the goodwill and respect of the witches. As expected, the hand on his back loosened a lot. He was then turned over and pulled up from the bed. Yorko finally saw the face of the person who attacked him. The person, who was called Annie, was probably a woman. Even though she was covered by a long robe, her body was shockingly tall and sturdy. Her appearance was incomparably heroic. 2 sword-like eyebrows were slightly tilted upwards, her eyes were long and narrow, and her hair was pulled back into a ponytail, revealing her smooth forehead. If her voice was a little lower, he would believe that she was a man, but her appearance was somewhat enviable. In that case, why didn't you unlock Amy? This question again. Yorko had to repeat what he said before. I did it for her safety. It would be more dangerous if she didn't believe me and sneaked out. Where are you going to take her? Annie was obviously not as easy to coax as Amy. She did not comment on Yorko's words. Are you going to give her to the king of Grey Castle? Of course. No, he corrected himself in the middle of his sentence. My old friend doesn't treat the witches as slaves. There are many witches living in his domain, just like normal people. Moreover, they have formed an organization to protect the rights of their own kind. Enough. Annie interrupted him sharply. Yorko immediately shut his mouth. He had heard about these things when he was chatting with Hill. He heard that when the demonic plague broke out in the king's city, His Majesty relied on the power of the Witch Union to contain the plague released by the church. This was obviously a good thing, but he did not know why Annie's face became very gloomy. It sounds like the Bloodfang Association. Annie's voice turned cold. They used to advertise themselves like this. Blood, what? Yorko was startled and had a bad feeling in his heart. Witches can only believe in themselves, not the promises of the nobles. She glanced around the room and quickly found the key hanging on the wall. Wait, you want to take her away? We're underground. As you saw when you came in, the karst cave was full of guards. How are you going to get out? I have my own way. You don't need to worry about it. Annie unlocked the lock and put Amy down. She then grabbed Yorko and locked one of his feet on the anklet. You really don't want to think about it? Yorko became a little braver when he saw that Annie did not seem to want to kill him. He obediently let Annie do what she wanted and made a final attempt. It's more appropriate for me to take her out. I'll hand her over to you after we get out of the courtyard. In this way, it won't easily arouse suspicion and won't leave any traces. It sounds really good, but it's also possible that I'll be greeted by swords and godstones when I get out. Annie remained unmoved. I once made a big mistake because I was too gullible. I won't make the same mistake again. After Yorko was secured, she dragged number 76 in. She also tied her hands behind her back and locked one of her feet. You didn't kill her? Number 76's head was stained with blood. Apparently, she had been badly beaten. She was still in a coma, but judging from the slight rise and fall of her chest, she was still alive. It's not too late to kill her after I save Amy. You too. Annie's words made Yorko tremble. But I won't kill you now for the sake of the king of Grey Castle defeating the church. Maybe we all owe him a thank you, but it doesn't mean that I'll unconditionally trust him. I'll bring this to His Majesty. In addition, if you encounter any difficulties, you can come to the residence of the ambassador to ask for my help. Of course, it's better if you don't come. We can all save a lot of effort. Yorko thought it was better this way. He had tried his best anyway. He could not force them to go to Grey Castle. Even his old friends could not blame him. Chapter 656. Hey, are you okay? Yorko nudged number 76 with his other foot, but she did not respond. He sighed and moved closer to her. Then he picked up the coat that had fallen on the ground with his mouth and covered both of them. Forget about romance, let's just sleep like this for one night. After experiencing so many twists and turns, he found himself unexpectedly calm. The underground auction, spending a lot of money, being the center of attention, and the witch's night attack. In just one night, he had experienced something that he had not experienced for more than 20 years. And this thrilling feeling was not as bad as he had imagined. Of course, if Yorko were to experience it again, he would never agree to it. After a sleepless night, it was already noon the next day when the people of the exhibition found them in a daze. Yorko was then quickly moved to a spacious and comfortable room. Not only did servants bring him soft bread and freshly squeezed juice, but also maids checked him from head to toe, including the area between his legs. At his request, Otto Luashi, who had been waiting anxiously outside, was also taken into the karst cave. What happened? Otto asked eagerly as soon as he saw the ambassador. I heard that you were injured? You can leave now. After dismissing the servants sent by Black Money, Yorko told them the whole story. You've really put me in a bad situation. I almost lost my life. Fortunately, they didn't kill me for my kindness and care for the witches in the auction. If it had been someone else, he would have become a cold corpse. Complaining was his specialty in Grey Castle King City for many years. Even if he could not get any practical benefits, he could at least earn some guilt or sympathy, which might be useful in the future. And judging from Otto's appearance, he was sure that he would not be indifferent. As expected, the latter looked very uneasy. This is my negligence. I'll make it up to you when we go back. What about the 4,000 golden dragon coins? The witches escaped from your room, which is under the jurisdiction of Black Money. They probably won't deduct the bidding fee. Didn't you save a lot of money? Yorko teased. You saved the witches and didn't waste the black letter. The black letter will be remade every time the exhibition is held, so it's not exactly wasteful. Otto smiled helplessly. But the golden dragon has been saved. Yorko suddenly remembered what number 76 had said in his ear. You only need to pay Black Money 500 golden dragon. Sir, do you want to buy me? Compared to 4,000, 500 was not that much of an exaggeration. Perhaps he could ask Otto to be generous this time? Just take it as compensation for the fright. Yorko cleared his throat and was about to speak when the bedroom door was pushed open. A man wearing a silver mask walked in accompanied by 2 attendants. It was obvious that he was quite old. His dark brown hair was mixed with many silver strands. He was wearing a loose silk robe, and the pitch-black dragon head logo on his chest was particularly eye-catching. I'm the person in charge of this round of the exhibition. You can call me Silver Mask. He bowed slightly. Black Money apologizes for what happened to you. Fortunately, you weren't hurt in this accident. We've launched an investigation into the witch's escape and will inform you as soon as we have any news. The auction price won't be deducted from the black letter unless we can catch the witches, and you still need her by then. Ahem. I understand. Yorko coughed twice. After all, it was still him who wanted to buy the witches, not Otto Luashi, so he had to continue the show. Don't hand her over to anyone except me. The 10th round of the auction will always be valid. As you wish. By the way, how did the people who attacked me get into the exhibition? These murderers kidnapped other visitors. We've found 2 other victims who were robbed of their black letters in a house in the suburbs, Silver Mask replied. More than one person? Yes, this was a premeditated action. He nodded. We didn't expect the witches to have other accomplices. In other words, we didn't expect them to have the guts to attack when the King of Dawn was searching for them. Did the person who threatened you leave any clues? No, she ran away when she heard that I was the ambassador of Grey Castle. Yorko spread his hands. Hasn't Black Money thought of changing to a more reliable audit method? I suppose it's not the first time that people can enter just by relying on an invitation, right? You're absolutely right. A burst of laughter came from under the silver mask. But this is also the charm of Black Money. Compared to the risk, people prefer to be able to bid for their favorite goods without revealing their identity. Of course, when we issue the black letter, we carefully consider each target, including the importance of the black letter and the ability to keep it safe. No matter who the black letter came from, the two victims definitely won't have another chance to get an invitation. Well, Yurko shrugged. So how did she escape from the underground? I remember there are many guards on the passage from the karst cave to the courtyard. It's impossible for her to run out with a burden. Could the criminals who sneaked in still be hiding somewhere in the underground cave, waiting for you to let your guard down? Silver Mask shook his head. They crawled out through the air vents. Several iron fences were burned through, which should be caused by the witch's ability. Is this the escape route that Annie prepared in advance? And more than one witch participated in this rescue. It seems that Otto's efforts were in vain. In this case, there's no other way. Yorko pretended to change the subject inadvertently. I wonder how my guide is doing. She'll be severely punished by black money. Protecting the distinguished guests is also a guide's responsibility. She's no longer qualified to take this position. Can I see her? Do you mean you want to punish her personally? Yorko glanced at Otto. I want to buy her. But she's already a sinner of black money. Silver Mask said hesitantly, 500 golden dragon? Let's pay with the black letter. Wait. Mr. Ambassador? Otto was surprised. Look, Yorko pressed Otto's hand and did not answer. Silver Mask was silent for a while and then nodded. I see. If you insist, we'll give number 76 to you as a gift. As a gift? Yorko was stunned at first, then he was delighted. Chapter 657. Holding the stone of lighting, Banach Lothar walked step by step to the deepest part of the black money. It was a steep slope. Even with the help of his servants, he still found it difficult to walk. I'm old after all. He felt sad. At the age of 20, he took over the family business from his father. Today, he had built the Chamber of Commerce into a behemoth with wealth comparable to that of a country. Only he knew the struggle and excitement during this period. Even though the title of Sir was only an honorary one, his reputation and status in the Kingdom of Dawn were not much lower than that of the three families of Radiant Light. But great achievements did not mean that they could be passed on to future generations. In fact, as the scale of the Chamber of Commerce continued to expand, its foundation was in jeopardy. In order to consolidate the strength of the Chamber of Commerce, many influential businessmen and even upper-class nobles joined it. When he was alive, they were either reliable arms or valuable pawns. But what about after he died? Would they still be willing to stay in their current positions? This question hardly needed to be answered. Banach had 5 sons and 1 daughter. Among them, the most outstanding son, Victor Lothar, was only 21 years old. Although he had shown extraordinary talent in business, he could not suppress his cunning partners at such a young age. The Chamber of Commerce was not the private property of the Lothar family. If he forced Victor to take over his position, he was afraid that he would suffer a strong backlash. At that time, it was not a big deal for the Chamber of Commerce to be torn apart, but his children might be in danger. But to give away the behemoth that he had worked hard to build in his life? Banach was really unwilling to do so. As he was thinking, he suddenly slipped. Sir, be careful. The servants beside him immediately held him. Banach adjusted his body several times before he regained his footing. Obviously, this body no longer had the vigor of youth. He was already 69 years old. How many times could he repeat such a steep slope? He had to hurry. At the thought of the promise given by the oracle, Banach's heart was rekindled. Only by becoming one of them could he solve this seemingly unsolvable problem once and for all. The downslope gradually became flat, and the surrounding air began to become humid. Banach faintly heard the sound of the underground undercurrent hitting the stone wall, which was like continuous thunder, dull and vigorous. To be honest, he didn't like this kind of place. Although it was secluded enough, it didn't give people a sense of security. He was always worried that one day the water would break down the walls of the cave and swallow this place completely. In fact, many similar situations had already occurred in this group of caves. There were quite a few passages that had turned into deep pools due to the backflow of underground water. In the end, they had no choice but to be sealed. Black money only occupied a small part of the karst caves. If Banach was given enough time, he could even build an underground city here. When they reached the bottom of the slope, the light suddenly dimmed. It was not that the stone of lighting had dimmed, but the space around them had suddenly expanded several times, and the light could no longer illuminate the stone walls on both sides. The sound of the underground water flow became very loud, as if a branch was passing under their feet. In the pitch-black cave, 2 balls of yellow light were flickering in the distance. They were the guards sent by the oracle to receive him. "All right, you guys can send me here. But Your Excellency, there's still a long way ahead," the servant said worriedly. "It doesn't matter. I'll walk the last part of the road by myself," Banach said slowly. The two did not dare to say another word due to the power he had accumulated over the years. "Yes, please be careful, Your Excellency." Leaving the cave entrance, he carefully walked to the center of the karst cave. This cave at the bottom of the karst cave group was very strange. It was shaped like an isolated island, surrounded by bottomless ravines. The protruding rock mountain in the center and the slope were only connected by a narrow stone bridge. When he walked on the bridge, he was surrounded by darkness, and the magic stone could only illuminate a few meters under his feet. If it were not for the yellow light on the opposite side, Banach would even have the illusion that he was walking in the abyss of hell, and the roaring water under his feet was the hissing of ghosts and evil spirits. A thin mist gradually rose around him, and the range of light was further reduced. It was formed by excessive water vapor. He knew that he had to be very careful. The bridge was likely to be covered with moss. If he slipped off the stone bridge, even the oracle could not save him. Facing the moist air, Banach Lothar finally arrived at the central rock island. Before he could take 2 breaths, the oracle's guard had turned around and walked backward. "Follow me. Your Excellency has been waiting for you for a long time." Having no time to complain, he took a deep breath and followed the two. The peak of this isolated island-like rocky mountain was no more than 100 paces in radius. It wasn't very big, and the place to meet the oracle was located inside the mountain. Before stepping on the stone stairs around the mountain, Banach noticed that there was an extremely wide cave behind the karst cave. It was connected with the slope that he came from and formed a straight line. However, it was much closer to the rock mountain and also much larger. The cave wall was a standard circle, and the edge that the magic stone could illuminate was very smooth, as if it was artificially carved. If he guessed right, the oracle's guard must have entered the Kingdom of Dawn through this underground passage. After entering the rock mountain, Banach was so tired that he almost could not stand. Fortunately, the oracle did not care about the posture when they met. The guard brought a soft cushion and let him sit in the 1-square-foot stone room. Then he put down the heavy curtain to isolate the sound of water outside. "Are you ready?" one of them asked. "Yes, please summon Your Excellency." Banach wiped the fine sweat on his forehead. Although he was exhausted, his heart was full of expectation. As soon as he finished speaking, the magic stone of lighting in his hand suddenly flashed. Not only his, but also the magic stones of the other 2 guards. Then the 3 light sources went out one by one, and the stone room was shrouded in pitch-black darkness. As it was not the first time that Banach had seen such a scene, he was not surprised. Instead, he was full of admiration and awe for the power of the oracle. Soon, a purple light curtain rose from the ground, turning the surrounding darkness into a different scene. It was also deep in the ground, but red lava flowed below. Numerous rivers of fire gushed out of the holes in the rock wall and converged at the lower part, forming a cobweb-like picture. Above the illumination of the flames was the oracle's torso, a huge sarcoma with countless roots like a plant hanging on the rock wall. The tangled epidermis pulsed rhythmically, as if it was breathing hot air. It had neither eyes nor mouth, but it could see and talk to him, directly through his consciousness, echoing in his mind. This was the true appearance of the oracle. It did not need to transform into a human form because it itself was extraordinary. Chapter 658. No need to be so polite. The female voice appeared directly in his mind. "What's the situation up there?" He did not need to speak either. He only needed to think the answer in his mind. It was difficult to adapt to this kind of communication at first, but after mastering it, communication became very smooth. Of course, it was also more difficult to lie. Oracle, something unexpected happened. They didn't accept the invitation of the ambassador of Grey Castle. Banach repeated the whole story. It was my mistake. I didn't expect them to be so vigilant. A plan that calculates people's minds is easy to fail. The oracle's tone did not sound dissatisfied, but was mixed with an inexplicable nostalgia. Do you have any remedial measures? As long as they have to accept the invitation, he paused. Take advantage of His Majesty Apen Moya's new policy. Tisk. Mortals. Banach could not help but be stunned. My lord? I don't like this witch elimination policy. Can you guarantee that no one will get hurt? This. Not to mention getting hurt, it would be normal if some of the witches were captured and executed. After all, the purpose of the plan was to let the witches set off to the south and go to the western region of Grey Castle. As for those who survived, there was no requirement. Is this what you think? The oracle's voice suddenly rose a few octaves. The wriggling tentacles on its body and the surging lava under the ground showed its anger. Don't forget what I said. In the face of doomsday, every witch is important. No, my lord, I bear in mind every word you said, Banach said to himself. He was communicating with the oracle through his mind, and any thoughts would be conveyed to the oracle. I naturally hope that no innocent people will be hurt, but that will take more time, and the manpower will need to be rearranged. Not everyone has the courage to go against the royal family and at the same time keep the secret. Let my guards help you, the oracle quickly replied. How long will it take? Banach was relieved. He had seen the ability of these guards. An ordinary knight was no match for them, and the weaker ones could not even see their movements. If 2 or 3 of them fought side by side, they could easily resist 10 times their number of knight, which was enough to show that the oracle was extraordinary. The third step of the plan should be completed within 2 weeks. Then let's do it. Lord Oracle. Banach hesitated. Are witches really so important? Would God only favor them? In terms of wealth or power, I'm more suitable. A more suitable chosen one? The oracle interrupted him. You don't know what you're talking about. Neither wealth nor power means anything at the end of the world. God was looking for a savior who could use his great power, not a spokesperson for the secular world. You are indeed very useful, mortal, so when the task is completed, I will give you a suitable reward, such as immortality, but you must also know your place. Banach knew what the doomsday referred to. Every 400 years, a blood-red moon would appear in the sky, and the gates of hell would open accordingly. The devils would swarm out of it, and a massacre would soon sweep the entire continent. Those who could resist these ferocious aliens were called the Chosen Ones. Now he had a better understanding of the Chosen Ones. The person the oracle was looking for seemed to have a direct connection with the power of God, and she must be a witch. But he was still a little reluctant. Will there definitely be a chosen one among the witches in Grey Castle? The oracle fell into a rare silence. After a while, the voice sounded again. No one knows the answer. This is just an attempt, and such an attempt has been going on for hundreds of years. What if you can't find it? Then keep looking until the end of the world destroys everything. If everyone died, then immortality would be meaningless. It seemed that he had to beg God to let him find something on this trip. Banach smiled bitterly. I see. I'll try my best to do this. The tentacles on the sarcoma wriggled neatly, which was a sign of satisfaction. There's one more thing. Is the church really defeated? Since the news of the church's defeat reached the Kingdom of Dawn, the oracle had been particularly concerned about it. He even asked Banach to personally send someone to Coldwind Ridge to verify whether the news was true. It's true. The foot of Coldwind Ridge looks like it has been trampled by demonic beasts. There are deep pits and ravines everywhere, and there are thousands of graves around. According to the locals, this was all done by the king of Grey Castle. All his dead were brought back to the western region of the kingdom, while the dead of the church were burned and buried on the spot. In addition, the merchants who came back from the Hermes Plateau also said that the whole holy city was dead silent, completely devoid of the prosperous atmosphere of the past. Is this their end? The oracle's voice suddenly became very light, but it returned to normal in a blink of an eye. Let's call it a day. I'm tired. Yes, Your Excellency. Banach bowed and said. The scene in the lava receded like the tide, and darkness soon swept over. Then the magic stone flashed a few times and lit up the stone room again. Everything was like a dream. The medicine this time. A guard handed over a porcelain bottle. Drink it. The oracle is very satisfied with your recent performance. Thank you, the oracle, for your reward. Banach took the porcelain bottle excitedly and drank the liquid in the bottle. Suddenly, a burning warm current rose from his stomach, making his whole body regain strength, and his hands and feet seemed to be much more flexible. Unfortunately, the effect of the medicine could not be maintained for a long time, nor could it prolong his life. According to the oracle, in addition to relieving fatigue and restoring physical strength in a short time, it also had a certain strengthening effect on the body. Before being granted immortality, he needed to repair his broken body bit by bit in order to withstand the severe pain of the transformation. Otherwise, the power would tear him apart. It was these words that made Banach believe in the oracle. If the oracle was a liar, just taking out this medicine that could rejuvenate the body would be enough to make a large number of nobles and rich merchants completely fall for it. Why would it be necessary to tell the oracle the function and nature of the medicine? 3 years ago, he could only move in a wheelchair pushed by a servant. Now, he could at least stand and walk on his own feet, relying on the oracle's secret medicine. If he could fulfill the oracle's request and further obtain immortality, all the problems that troubled him would be easily solved. Banach lifted the curtain and walked to the stone stairs around the mountain with his head held high. Chapter 659. Roland made himself a cup of tea and looked at Nightingale. Do you want it? Yes, thank you. She leaned back on the recliner, holding a dried fish in one hand and a new script written by May in the other. She was reading it with relish. Ever since Anna talked to her, Nightingale disappeared for 2 days. When she reappeared in front of Roland, she seemed to have been relieved of a heavy burden and returned to her previous carefree self. She always had a smile on her face, and she would occasionally sneak a few glances at him, her eyes full of energy. Just like how she was now. She put her feet on the coffee table without hesitation, and her robe was pulled to one side, revealing her slender legs wrapped in black stockings. She would only temporarily hide herself when someone came in. This seductive posture made Roland's eyes look to the side involuntarily. As a result, half the morning had passed, and he hadn't even finished a single drawing. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have asked Soroya to draw these thermal socks that were close to nylon material. He brought a cup of tea that emitted a pleasant fragrance to Nightingale. This is the tea you wanted. She put down the script, took it with both hands and sniffed hard. It smells so good. Can you add a piece of sugar for me? In the future, Nightingale was undoubtedly in the middle between the salty and sweet factions, and she wouldn't get fat no matter how much she ate. During the period when Roland was unconscious, she lost a lot of weight, and she lost a lot of weight. However, after he woke up, she quickly returned to normal, and there seemed to be an upper limit to her weight. After reaching the standard, it would no longer increase. In the past, Roland would nag her that eating too much would make her fat, but now he realized that she didn't need to worry about this at all. After putting a piece of sugar into her teacup, he returned to the table and drew a few more strokes. Finally, he couldn't hold back his curiosity and said, Nightingale, Anna, what did she say to you? Well, she flashed and steadily appeared on the desk. It's a secret. You can't even tell me? It's Anna's request. Nightingale hesitated and shook her head. If it's about me, I'll tell you whatever you want to know. But this, she asked me to keep it a secret for the time being. Oh, okay. Roland took a sip of tea and didn't ask any more questions. Although he could go straight to Anna, anyone with a normal EQ wouldn't repeatedly mention this matter at a time like this. At least he could see that Anna wasn't angry about it. Just as he picked up the quill again, Nightingale suddenly said, Thank you. What? Roland was stunned. He raised his head and met her eyes. The autumn sun dyed her long golden hair and left bright spots on her face. Her moving face was as beautiful as a painting under the warm sunlight. Time seemed to stop because of it. Thank you for telling her my wish. In the afternoon, good news came from the Ministry of Construction. According to the new steelmaking facility drawings drawn by Roland, the first converter steel mill was completed at the foot of the North Slope Mountain. Of course, rather than calling it a factory, it looked more like a simple iron shed. Inside, there was a rather large piece of new equipment. Unlike the previous furnaces, the smelting equipment was made of steel from top to bottom. The angular grate and the huge converter had been coated with a heat-resistant coating. The dull gray surface gave off a majestic and heavy feeling under the sun. When Roland arrived at the furnace area with the officials from City Hall, the new furnace was surrounded by the recruited veteran workers. Obviously, everyone was full of curiosity about it. Your Majesty, can this furnace really be used to smelt steel? It doesn't even have a place to burn the fire. Although Lozia of the Ministry of Construction had doubted this before, he still followed the requirements of the drawings and completed the converter meticulously. Its parts were all made by Anna. With the help of Hummingbird, the time limit was shortened to 1 week. In nature, only fire can produce heat, Roland said with a smile. Tell the workers to prepare for the furnace test. The 3 main technologies for steelmaking were the open hearth furnace, the converter, and the electric furnace. Roland thought for a long time and chose the third one after excluding the electric furnace. Although the open hearth furnace was the simplest in structure and was closer to the traditional furnace in operation, its shortcomings were also very obvious. First of all, it required a large amount of fuel, which was very disadvantageous to the available resources of Neverwinter. After all, the coal mine was far away at the source of the Redwater River, and the coking plant had just started. It was already very difficult to meet the needs of the blast furnace. Adding an open hearth furnace to smelt steel would cause a shortage of fuel. This was also the biggest advantage of the converter. It almost did not need to consume fuel. By oxidizing the impurities such as manganese, silicon, and carbon in the pig iron, it automatically released heat and kept the temperature of the molten iron at a high level, so that the smelting reaction could continue. The second disadvantage of the open hearth furnace was that it occupied a large area and took a long time to smelt. In order to strengthen the use of fuel, the open hearth furnace needed to build a heat storage pool to preheat the air in advance, which took more than half a day to produce a furnace of molten iron. If it was a converter, the size of the furnace was the same as the size of the equipment, and the rail and molten iron transportation system could be used together. The smelting process only took dozens of minutes, and when the technology was mature, it could even be shortened to less than a quarter of an hour. In view of these 2 advantages, Roland chose the converter as the main steelmaking equipment in Neverwinter in the future. With the help of the steam engine, the workers quickly poured a large pile of pig iron ingots into the pear-shaped furnace. Anna, start the fire. Anna nodded and went up the stairs to the top of the converter. She summoned the black fire to melt the iron ingots. After a while, the red-hot molten iron in the furnace shone on her face. When the production officially started, the molten iron in the steel mill would be supplied by the blast furnace, which was why he built the steel mill in the furnace area. Follow the steps I told you, Roland said to the person in charge of the steelmaking team. Insert the blowpipe into the mouth of the furnace. Although it was the first time for these selected veteran workers to work in the converter, they had operated similar subsystems before, so there was no essential difference between operating the blowpipe and controlling the trailer. The steam engine rumbled, and a steel pipe slowly fell from the top of the furnace into the furnace. The other end of the steel pipe was connected to a coated flexible pipe, which led to the steam engine driving the air extraction equipment. As the oxygen-rich air was sucked into the converter, the furnace mouth suddenly burst into flames. Orange sparks splashed from the furnace like blooming fireworks. The dazzling white light was so dazzling that it was almost impossible to look at it directly. This spectacular scene amazed the officials in City Hall. Facing the scorching heat wave that was blowing against his face, Roland felt incomparably satisfied. Chapter 660. As the molten iron surged, silicon and manganese were oxidized first, and then the carbon in the pig iron was oxidized. At a temperature of more than 1,500 degrees, the carbon and oxygen in the air combined to form carbon monoxide. The heat released caused the furnace to boil. The flame ejected from the furnace mouth almost engulfed the blowpipe and the grate. This was why the grate was also covered with a heat-resistant coating. A large amount of carbon monoxide escaped and came into contact with the abundant air outside the furnace mouth. Then it burned violently, as if the furnace had been set on fire. For a moment, the roar produced by the expansion of the gas overshadowed the sound of the steam engine. Everyone could not help but step back in the face of this volcanic eruption. Only Roland stood with his hands behind his back, facing the hot wind, completely immersed in the roar of the steel flame. Unfortunately, the current technology could only inject air to smelt steel. If pure oxygen could be used in the future, the flame would be even brighter. The last to participate in the reaction were phosphorus and sulfur. When the oxides of these two and limestone formed slag, the flame began to recede. At this time, the molten iron had basically become steel. The lighter slag floated on top of the molten iron. As long as the converter tilted, the molten iron could be poured out of the tap like pouring tea. According to the rules of modern steel mills, at this time, slag-blocking balls, slag-blocking darts, infrared detection and other methods would be used to prevent the scum from flowing into the ladle. The current technology in Neverwinter was not capable of this, so Roland's solution was very simple. He did not pour the molten steel too thoroughly. When there was still a small amount of molten steel left in the furnace, he would directly lift the furnace and then pour it out with the slag. It was not a big deal to waste a little bit of molten steel. If he collected a lot of molten steel, he could put it back in the furnace and refine it again. To ensure the quality of the steel, the last step was to remove the excess oxygen in the molten iron. The continuous shipment of bauxite from Longsong Stronghold could act as a deoxidizer. A barrel of pure aluminum separated by Lucia was poured into the molten steel. The resulting alumina slag, along with the unreacted aluminum, floated to the surface. At this point, the whole steelmaking process was completed. When the bright molten steel flowed into the mold and turned into pieces of dark red steel ingots, the officials in City Hall were so shocked that they couldn't speak. In this era, the main method of making steel was still at the level of forging steel. A steel armor could be passed down from generation to generation as a family heirloom. No one had ever seen steel being produced like flowing water. Even though the Star of Steel could produce steel in large quantities, most people regarded it as an accessory of the witch's ability. Without Anna and Lucia, this kind of steel could not be produced. But this time it was different. Seeing that ordinary people could do it without the help of witches, they faintly understood what it meant. There was only one Star of Steel, but there could be countless converters and workers. Steel was no longer a rare material. From now on, this strong metal would be produced in large quantities from the foot of the North Slope Mountain to replace the soft and fragile wooden and bronze wares. Roland, on the other hand, was very satisfied with the frightened expressions on the faces of the City Hall officials. If they could not be moved by the majestic beauty of the steelmaking process, they probably would not be a qualified leader. The workers might only see the steel ingots in front of them, but they should be able to see the future behind the steel ingots. So far, Neverwinter's coal and iron recycling industry had begun to take shape. From mining to smelting iron, from smelting iron to steelmaking, and finally to casting steel into all kinds of objects, this process could be achieved by ordinary people. Coupled with the rapid growth of the population and the popularization of education, Roland could already hear the sound of the steel wheel rolling over the earth. Of course, the quality of the newly produced steel still needed to be further tested by Lucia. According to the test results, the blowing time and slag removal formula could be slowly adjusted, but everything had finally begun. After completing a great undertaking, Roland did not stop at all. With the help of the memory replay in the dream world, he still had a lot of work to do. Now that the elementary textbooks had been updated and re-edited, he turned his attention to the higher-level mechanical teaching materials. Now that Neverwinter had the foundation of mass production of steel, The high-performance processing equipment was undoubtedly something he urgently needed. The first few batches of simple machine tools were becoming less and less suitable for processing high-end products. When faced with components such as long-song cannons, heavy machine guns, and grenade fuses, they were somewhat inadequate. Where could he find the detailed drawings? The school library might be a good choice. When Roland was studying, he often went there, but he did not encounter the legendary encounter. Instead, he read a lot of miscellaneous books, many of which were related to the principles of mechanical design. After dinner, he went to bed early. Since wandering in the other world did not count as sleeping, the first day would be very difficult if he followed the normal schedule. In addition, there was no air conditioning in the apartment building, so it was impossible to catch up on sleep under the hot noon sun. He could only go to sleep early and use the energy he had saved in his dreams. When he entered the dream world, it was still a sunny midsummer morning. There were more than 10 missed calls on the phone beside the bed. Opening them, he saw that they were all from drug dealers, and the same was in his message box. "Brother, do you still have any armor? I have a friend who is looking for some filming time. Contact me immediately if you have any. The price can be higher this time. How about 700? Swords and sabers have also increased by 200. That's nice, right? But I don't need to use it. It looks quite scary. If you're not satisfied with the price, we can discuss it again. Big brother, can you answer me?" Roland directly turned to the last message, which was sent by the bank. It showed that the balance in his card had increased to 3,600 yuan, of which 1,500 yuan was the living expenses sent by Zero's family. The money would last him a long time. With a light tap of his fingers, he deleted all the messages, put on a short-sleeved shirt and shorts, and walked into the living room. Zero had not gotten up yet. Roland was too lazy to wait for the little girl to make breakfast. He went downstairs and found a noodle shop in the alley to sit down. "Boss, a big bowl of shredded meat noodles." But now that he had money, he should naturally enjoy it, right? It was a delicacy that even the king could not enjoy. After all, there was no rice in Grey Castle. The boiled noodles were soon served. Roland ate breakfast while observing the apartment building across the street. Chapter 661. These losers from the Soul Battlefield had obviously been completely accepted by the dream world. The most obvious thing was that although they had different colored hair, and their faces were very different from those of the city residents, no one felt that it was strange. For example, Roland himself had long gray hair, a high nose bridge, and light gray eyes. If he had been in the original world, he would definitely have attracted the attention of many people. Now, the residents were just like ordinary people. Young men were biting deep-fried dough sticks, carrying briefcases and newspapers under their arms. They were walking in a hurry, probably to catch the early bus to the company. The old people gathered in the open space in front of the apartment building in twos and threes. Some were waving their limbs and doing leisurely morning exercises, while others set up a chess stand and played a game of chess with their friends. In addition to the undulating chirping of cicadas, the cries of babies, the shouts of hawkers, and the sound of people reading in the corridor also gradually merged with the morning breeze, mixing with the noise of the city from all directions, forming a unique symphony that belonged to the era of the tube-shaped apartment. This scene, which was full of life, made Roland feel particularly nostalgic. Just then, a woman ran along the alley. The chopsticks in Roland's hand trembled subconsciously. It was Garcia Wimbledon. She was wearing a light sportswear, revealing her snow-white thighs. Her gray hair was tied up on top of her head, and there was a towel hanging around her neck. Sweat soaked her collar, and fine beads of sweat could also be seen on her arms. Apparently, she had been running for a long time. What surprised him was that the people in the alley all turned their gazes to her at the same time. Many of them even whistled, looking especially excited, as if they had seen a celebrity. Garcia ignored them and kept running. She passed through the alley like the wind, and finally disappeared at the entrance of the apartment building. "It's that Garcia," someone in the noodle shop exclaimed. "Am I right? If you get up early, you can see her. As long as the weather is good, she will run here for an hour every day." It's the first time I've met a character from TV. She looks much better than she does on TV. By the way, Garcia has an important match recently, right? No matter what, I support her. I hope she can win in the end. Nonsense, she's a genius. Roland was greatly surprised by the discussions around him. Why did he feel that the residents here were very familiar with Garcia? What was the competition? Was she a rising star in the sports world? While the boss was wiping the table, he drank the last mouthful of soup, took out his wallet and asked, "Why, is that woman famous?" The owner looked at him in surprise. "You don't live here, do you? Everyone on Tongzi Street knows Miss Garcia." "I just moved here not long ago." Roland was even more curious. "What does she do?" "She's a martial artist." He almost spat out his saliva. Cough cough. "What?" "Hey, you'll know when you watch TV. She's the most famous person in this area. It's also because she lives here that we can live here." But the owner pointed behind Roland. "Look over there." He looked back. He hadn't noticed it before, but now he realized that there was a big demolition painted on the wall of the shop opposite the alley. Demolition? Yes, the development company has long wanted to demolish this place and build a new skyscraper. They said that Tongzi Street was too old and unsightly in the bustling city. Bullshit. This is a cultural relic building. The owner sighed as he searched for the change. Those people want to move us to the suburbs. If Garcia hadn't exposed this on TV and won the support of many people, the developers would have started to drive us away. The corner of Roland's mouth twitched. That's really a bit too much. That's why we all support Miss Garcia. The owner smiled and slapped the change into his hand. Since you're a member of Tongzi Street, sooner or later you'll be her supporter. Although the dream world would use some unimaginable power to piece together some obviously inconsistent fragments, this was too inconceivable. What was a martial artist? A new event in the Olympic Games? And demolishing the apartment of souls? This place was connected to the door to the memory fragments, and the creator lived here. So it was thanks to Third Sister that he could live here? With mixed feelings, Roland returned to room 0825. Zero happened to walk out of the bedroom with sleepy eyes. Her hair was messy, and her dress was wrinkled. One side of her collar had slipped down, revealing half of her shoulder. "Uncle, you're up? I'll go make breakfast now." "There's no need. I've already eaten. I also brought you something to eat." Roland put the omelets, shumai, and milk on the table and then turned on the TV. The little girl walked down from the table with a puzzled look. "Why are you getting up so early now?" "I said I found a job, so I can't sleep in anymore. Your family sent me living expenses, and the company also gave me my first salary. I don't have to worry about money for the time being." "You have to use it sparingly. Who knows how long you can last? Besides, there's still food in the fridge." Having said that, Zero quickly finished the breakfast. "By the way, do you know Garcia?" "Of course. Sister Garcia is a genius." Zero curled her lips and said, "She joined the Combat Association at the age of 20. I heard that she has never lost in the preliminaries. Everyone in the class regards her as their idol, but I think it's boring for them to fight on the stage." Not to mention why Garcia was called a sister and he was called an uncle. According to the little girl, these martial artists had formed an organization. "Are there many martial artists?" "There are only a few." Zero glanced at him. "Uncle, don't even think about it. Not everyone has this talent. Only those who have awakened the force of nature can walk on this path. Moreover, awakening is only the entry requirement. Without perseverance and perseverance, one will only become a puppet of power and bring a lot of trouble to everyone." "But how do you know so much?" "Our teacher said so. He also said that if you have time to fantasize about becoming a martial artist, you should do more exercises and strive to be a useful person in society." After washing up in the bathroom, she picked up her school bag and walked to the door. "I have a whole day of classes today. I'm leaving." After Zero left, Roland reached out his hand and felt the strange power in his heart. Could this be her so-called force of nature? He was suddenly interested in the dream world. Becoming a puppet of power, Why does it sound a bit like a magic bite? In order to accommodate the devourer's memory, what kind of self-consistent rule did it create? According to the original plan, Roland planned to go to the school library. Chapter 662. For the whole day, Roland watched every channel on TV. There were several programs that explained the martial arts competition. Different from traditional fighting, the arena of the martial arts competition was about half the size of a football field, and there were no referees on the field. The fights between the contestants were also much more intense. It was common for them to break the floor, and the sound of their fists was like muffled thunder, as if there were special effects. In terms of viewing value, it was indeed much more exciting than boxing or free combat. Just the punches hitting the flesh, without the number of rounds or intermission, was enough to excite the audience from beginning to end, not to mention that the two of them often spat out blood and were covered in cuts and bruises. Roland could not help but frown. As martial artists, this kind of fight was too hard. Weren't they worried that they would not be able to spend the prize money after winning the game? But what he cared about the most were those who were called martial artists. There was no doubt that their physical qualities were far better than ordinary people, and the force of nature did not only increase strength or speed, but also seemed to have special uses. Most of the commentators outside the arena would give these skills a special name, and they would publicize it as the nickname of the martial artists. For example, the man named Hurricane, who could instantly launch a high-speed series of punches, so his nickname was Storm. To be honest, wasn't this the same as showing one's trump card in front of the opponent? But it was still okay. What surprised Roland more was that he actually saw the demon in the game. It was a typical mad demon. It was tall and had burly arms. It didn't wear a mask or iron gloves, and its fangs and 3 fingers were clearly not human. However, the audience turned a blind eye to it. From the commentator's tone, it seemed that they only regarded it as a foreign martial artist. He finally saw the strangeness and power of the dream world. In order to make the demons that Zero devoured reasonable, the dream world even turned them into a minority race living in this world. What about the hybrid demonic beasts? Roland could not help but think of the image of a dragonkin made full of vitality. It was not until his stomach growled that he found that the sun was gradually setting in the west. Roland could not help but frown. Usually, Zero would have returned by now. According to the diary, her school was on Zhongshan Road, which was about 3 kilometers away from her apartment. She could get home in 10 minutes by bus. The cram school ended at 5:30 p.m., and it was already 6:15 p.m. Did something happen at school? Roland thought for a moment and decided to go downstairs to buy something to fill his stomach. After all, it was possible that she was hanging out with her friends. In the summer, the sky wouldn't be completely dark until around 8 o'clock. It wasn't strange to use this time to play in the park or the arcade. He was the landlord, not the nanny. Even if he went to school at this time, he might not be able to see her. It was better not to be a busybody. She was just a little girl. No matter how diligent she would occasionally want to slack off. This time he would make dinner. No, he would bring the takeout. At this moment, the image on the television suddenly flashed, and the martial arts competition turned into a news broadcast room. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we have some urgent news. The host held a stack of manuscripts and read with a worried look. There was a robbery at knife point on Zhongshan Road. A bus on Route 29 was hijacked. The traffic police have blocked the intersection. Please don't go out for the time being. We will broadcast the progress of the incident as soon as possible. The image on the television soon changed to the scene of the crime. The road was crowded with onlookers. Everyone was scrambling to stand outside the cordon, showing no intention of evacuating. Wait, isn't this the road that Zero usually takes to school? Roland's heart sank. Was she also kidnapped? This was definitely not good news. As an important part of the dream world, he did not know what would happen if a key character like Zero died. This was also the reason why he did not want to delve into Zero's family. According to his past experience in dreams, the brain's subconscious would act shamelessly when it encountered a problem that it could not make up. As a result, he would wake up suddenly and could not remember the content of the dream. Before he emptied his deep memory, Roland absolutely did not want to end this dream world prematurely. Not to mention the many residents in the apartment of souls. If they also had the gate of memory fragments, it would be excellent information for him to learn about the real world. Of course, it was also possible that Zero's existence had no effect on the dream world, but he did not want to take this risk. Thinking of the strange power surging in his body, Roland decided to go to the scene to see if he could be of help. After leaving Tongzi Street, he ran along the busy road. The heat surged and circulated in his body, so he did not feel tired at all. Even though he was running at a high speed, Roland could still easily control every part of his body and nimbly avoid the passers-by on the street. The 3-kilometer distance was shortened by the speed of a 100-meter sprint. In just 8 minutes, he arrived at the scene of the accident. However, to Roland's surprise, as soon as he squeezed into the crowd, he found that the robber had surrendered and was being interviewed in tears, saying that he was just impulsive. The onlookers booed and dispersed as usual. The traffic police were also clearing the roadblocks and preparing to resume traffic. The corner of Roland's mouth twitched. Didn't they say that the police would always arrive after the incident was over? Besides, he did not see Zero among the passengers who got off the bus. It seemed that this trip was in vain. As he was about to go back, a faint cry for help came from the narrow alley. Roland was startled and looked into the alley. Although the sun had not completely set, the light had been completely blocked by the tall buildings on both sides. It was pitch black inside and he could not see anything clearly. Was it an illusion? He slowly walked to the entrance of the alley. After a few minutes, he once again heard a faint cry for help. There was really someone inside. At this time, he should call the police for help. Roland looked back at the bus, only to find that the police had escorted the robber into the police car and were driving away. It was obviously too late to stop them. Should he pretend that he did not hear it? But he clearly felt that something in the alley was attracting him. Since he approached this place, the heat in his body suddenly became intense, as if it was clamoring and cheering, as if it was urging him to move forward. Roland tiptoed into the narrow alley. His eyes quickly adapted to the faint light. He saw a man with his back to him, and there was nothing else around him. "Is it you who is calling for help?" he asked with a frown. The man did not answer. Instead, he turned his head 180 degrees. This strange scene caused Roland to suck in a breath of cold air. However, the more surprising thing was yet to come. Chapter 663. Is this magic power? Roland thought of Nightingale's description of magic power. However, in his eyes, this rotating cyclone was more like a galaxy. The brightest nucleus was in the center, surrounded by several spiral arms revolving around the nucleus. Although it was only the size of a palm, Roland could feel the endless details and surging power contained in it. "Are you a martial fighter?" The man suddenly opened his mouth, and his voice was hoarse as if there was a leak in his throat. "You've got the wrong person." Roland was on high alert. "You're right." The burnt-faced man also turned around, but his head did not move. "You smell sweeter. If you were a girl, I might be interested in your words." Roland looked at the man's possible weak points and asked, "Are you the one who was backfired by the magic?" "No, the force of nature." "Force of nature?" The burnt-faced man snorted disdainfully through his almost ruined nose. "They have no idea where this force comes from, let alone its nature." "You say it like you know." Hell, was this still his dream? "I can't tell, but I can feel it. It doesn't belong to this world. It's a gift from the gods." The man grinned. "I thought the robbery would attract 1 or 2 martial artists, but I didn't expect that guy to surrender so quickly. Fortunately, it wasn't in vain. It's also good that I lured you here, crack?" Before the burnt-faced man finished his words, Roland had already started to attack. As the saying went, the one who strikes first gains the advantage, and the one who strikes later suffers the misfortune. Roland could tell from the man's tone that he was a dangerous person. It was not a wise move to wait for the enemy to finish talking. According to Roland's childhood fighting experience, the most important thing was to gain the upper hand by making a show of strength. He swung his fist and punched his opponent's forehead. His speed was as fast as lightning. Considering that his strength had greatly increased, he did not use his full strength in this punch. Even so, he could feel his cheekbone cracking under the fierce punch. The burnt-faced man was directly sent flying. The heat in his body boiled, as if it was rejoicing for this attack. After the man fell to the ground, he rolled twice and crashed into the wall before stopping. Just as he was about to struggle to get up, Roland chased after him without hesitation. This was the dreamscape. His opponent was also not human, at least not an ordinary person. No ordinary person could continue fighting with their cheekbone broken. He neither cried out in pain nor begged for mercy. From this point, it was tantamount to kicking himself out of the human category. Roland felt that his consciousness was extremely clear. Although the surging heat filled his entire body, it didn't make him feel dizzy at all. After gaining the upper hand with a show of strength, the second move was to beat the enemy when they were down. This time, he didn't hold back. Without any technique, it was as if he was punching a sandbag. Obviously, the burnt-faced man did not expect such a situation and could only try his best to resist. However, as Roland's strength increased, his defense quickly lost its effect. His hands, which were used to block, were broken into pieces, and his sternum and ribs were all broken. Every punch was like punching a piece of tofu. The man's hard muscles gradually turned into a puddle of mud. If he were an ordinary person, he would have been killed. "You're so pretentious." Roland cursed as he punched the man. "What's so great about turning your head around? Do you think you're in a horror film?" To be honest, when he first entered the alley, he was really shocked by the burnt-faced man's way of showing up. How could he play tricks in front of the creator of the dreamscape? Why didn't he go to heaven? "It's impossible." The burnt-faced man's voice had completely changed. Roland could barely hear what he was saying. "Why can't I use it?" "Use what?" Roland noticed that the cyclone above the burnt-faced man's forehead was spinning slower and slower. He tried to grab it, only to find that it had become solid. "Use this ball of magic power?" "No, don't touch it." Since the burnt-faced man said no, Roland had to do it. He pressed the burnt-faced man's head with one hand and pulled the cyclone with the other. When the heat flow in his body reached its peak, the cyclone was pulled out by Roland. The burnt-faced man immediately fell silent and collapsed to the ground as if he had lost all his vitality. After falling into Roland's palm, the cyclone changed from crimson to white on the inside and blue on the outside. It looked more like a galaxy now. However, it did not stay in Roland's hand for long. After it started spinning again, the cyclone shot out a beam of dazzling light into the sky, leaving a silver line between the sky and the earth. After a few seconds, the light disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Roland noticed that the warm current in his body had calmed down, and as if he had obtained great satisfaction, he felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction all over his body. He was completely at a loss. Maybe this world was much more complicated than he had imagined. Glancing at the burnt-faced man who was lying on the ground like a dead man, Roland twitched his mouth and left the alley. It was already dark when he returned to the tube-shaped apartment on the side of the long street. The light in the corridor attracted a swarm of flying insects, which made annoying buzzing sounds. He took out the key and inserted it into the keyhole under the dim light. Before he could turn the key, he heard hurried footsteps coming from the other side of the door. The door was opened, and Zero frowned. Her eyes were filled with dissatisfaction, but there was also a trace of anxiety. "Where have you been? Where have you been?" The two asked almost at the same time. "The cram school has an extra class because the teacher will come to check tomorrow. The school is closed for the day. I went to find you." "Find me?" the little girl asked doubtfully. "Yes, you didn't come back on time." Roland laughed. He rubbed her head and walked into the room. 3 dishes and a soup were placed on the table, but the bowls and chopsticks were still clean. Obviously, Zero had been waiting for him. That was why she came here as soon as she heard the sound of the lock being unlocked. "Let's eat." Roland sat at the table. "I'm starving. Are you worried that I'll be cheated by strangers?" She glared at him. "I'm not a child anymore. Just wait for me at home next time." Roland could not help but roll his eyes. Are junior high school students so sensible now? He remembered that when he was at this age, he was crazier than a dog. When he had spare change, he would go to the game hall. When he had no change, he would go to the back mountain to catch cockroaches. He would not go home until it was dark. Compared to this little girl, it was like heaven and earth. An inexplicable sense of guilt welled up in his heart. By the way, you have a holiday tomorrow, right? Yes. Although Zero still looked a little angry, her expression had softened a lot. What's wrong? Accompany me to the library, Roland said while eating. I'll buy you something. Buy something? Chapter 664. After 2 days in the dream world, the gray slate roof of the castle appeared in front of Roland again. He stretched out his hand, repeatedly clenched his fist and opened it. Except for the strange heat flow, his every move was exactly the same as the one in the dream world. If he could not escape by falling, he would not be able to distinguish the illusion from reality. Could the brain really simulate to this extent? Roland could not help but feel doubtful. Especially the cluster of stars, that looked like a magic cyclone. He had never seen the real appearance of magic power. If the force of nature was based on magic power, it should be blurred in the dream world. Coupled with the weird burnt-faced man and the heat flow that resonated with the cluster of stars. He suddenly became uncertain about his previous inference. He felt that his mind could not contain such a complicated and huge dream world. If the dream world was not in the subconscious, where would it be? After racking his brains for a long time, Roland still could not come up with a satisfactory answer. He shook his head and decided to put these things aside for the time being. Since he could not figure it out, he might as well stop thinking about it. It was more important to get down to business. After visiting the library with Zero, he borrowed a lot of useful design materials. Even if he just casually flipped through some of them, he could reproduce all of them. One of the books even included the ratio and properties of some commonly used alloys, which would undoubtedly save a lot of time for Anna and Lucia to test. In this way, he could find a way to manufacture the third-generation machine tools with higher precision. Of course, the first batch of workers would probably have to be personally supervised by him. Roland was particularly excited when he thought that people from all over Grey Castle were continuously gathering in the western region, and those who had already settled down were passing the universal education examination and going to work in batches. This was a process that was constantly accelerating, and he had now made a breakthrough. When he unified Grey Castle next year, Neverwinter might have the opportunity to touch the threshold of the Industrial Age. Once it entered the Industrial Age, there would definitely be earth-shaking changes in this territory. In the afternoon, Carr Van Bate, the head of the Ministry of Construction, brought the news of the completion of Route 67. Compared with Kingdom Avenue, the construction of this road was much faster. In addition to the shorter distance, the proficiency of the workers was also a key point. According to the previous promise, this batch of workers trained by the Ministry of Construction had all belonged to the border area. Your Majesty, if you don't have a new road construction plan, I plan to send all of them to the residential construction project, Carr said. Although it will increase their salary, there is a shortage of residential areas in Neverwinter. Roland was also aware of this situation. There was a total of nearly 5,000 construction workers, and half of them were busy building new residential areas. The reason was to accommodate the large number of people that the city hall had roped in from all over. In just 1 year, the original town had at least tripled in size, and this did not include the newly reclaimed farmlands south of the Redwater River. The roads will never be finished. He spread out the map of the border region and pointed to the North Slope Mountain. I plan to build a railway from the mine to the docks to carry the coal from the west. Isn't there a road here? Carr suddenly paused. Did you just say railway? That's right, a railway, or rather, a railway track. Roland nodded and said, it's similar to the railway transportation system in the mine, but it's all made of steel. I see. He thought for a moment and said, but it won't require many people. If it was just to pave a narrow hardened road, it would indeed not require many people. Roland smiled and did not say anything. In fact, he knew that the director of the Ministry of Construction did not understand at all. In his mind, he was not thinking about the simple transportation method that relied on hemp ropes, steam engines, or horses to transport coal. What he wanted was a train, a means of transportation that had brought earth-shaking changes to land transportation since its invention. And this short-distance railway was an experiment. The principle of the steam train was not complicated, but the railway system was huge. Roland did not know how many years of experiments and improvements had been made from the invention to the practical application of the train and its supporting equipment, but he was sure it was a long process. Fortunately, these things could be found in the dream world. As the symbol of industry, he had been deeply fascinated by these huge machines. No matter how heavy they were, they always spouted white mist and steadily traveled between the jungle and the mountains. The pitch-black connecting rods drove the wheels to rotate, making rhythmic clanging sounds and shortening the vast land to an acceptable range. Later, no matter how the power changed, its essence remained the same. Of course, it was not enough to have hardware facilities. The train needed a large number of railway workers to drive it, which was undoubtedly more complicated than operating a steam engine or a machine tool. According to Roland's plan, the railway connecting the North Slope Mountain and the dock was not only a technical experiment, but also a training base for the first generation of railway workers. "Let's use 200 people to pave the roadbed first," Roland said decisively. "The route will go in the direction of the misty forest and build it outside the second city wall." Carr looked worried and said, "But Your Majesty, your railway will be exposed to demonic beasts." "They're not interested in steel, and I don't intend to finish it before the months of demons," he said carelessly. "As for next year, we won't hide behind this mud wall anymore. Don't you think the border area is getting more and more crowded?" "You mean, we'll expand to the barbarian land. The resources there are no less than those in Grey Castle." Roland pointed to the vast fertile land in the northwest of the impassable mountain range. "If we want to fight against the demons, we can't just rely on a thin mud wall. If the Battle of Divine will broke out and the demons put the third obelisk in Tequila, the outpost might be close to the foot of the impassable mountain range. Defending the gap in the western region was almost certain to fail. The Witch Cooperation Association could enter the barbarian land by following the mountain path, and they could also sneak into the hinterland of Grey Castle in the same way. Even if they did not take the mountain path, it would be difficult for a group of flying devil beasts to circle around the mountain and come to the back every day. Only by turning the impassable mountain range into a city wall could the safety of the kingdom be protected. If the Longsong cannons were set up on each mountain, Roland's new town would be within the range of their shooting range. There was no river connecting this area to the interior, so the only way to quickly transport resources to the barbarian land was to rely on the railway. "The planning of the future defensive line is a big project, but I believe you can do it." Incorporating the impassable mountain range into the kingdom's territory sounded like a dream to any stonemason. If they could build such a city, they would definitely leave their name in history. Chapter 665. "In addition, I plan to build a landmark in Neverwinter," Roland continued. "A landmark?" Carr quickly recovered from his excitement and asked, "Do you mean an eye-catching building like a monument or a clock tower?" "You can also call it a spectacle." Roland nodded and then shook his head and said, "But I'm not going to build a useless landmark." After the war with the church, the First Army suffered the heaviest loss. Although Iron Axe reported that the morale of the army was not affected, the families were inevitably saddened by the casualties. In order to strengthen the confidence of his subjects, especially those from foreign lands, Roland thought of a spectacle that could make people gasp in amazement. Of course, some of the spectacles in history were built to satisfy the selfish desires of the rulers and did not benefit the builders. Even if it could show the strength of the country, Roland would not do it. "I plan to build a residential building on the south bank of the Redwater River, behind the industrial park." Carr did not speak. He obviously realized that the building would not be ordinary. Roland was very satisfied with Roland's calmness and said, "It will have about 15 floors. According to the calculation of 3.5 meters per floor, the height of the building will be over 50 meters. In other words, it will be close to the height of 4 city walls of the old King's City. That's the most magnificent project you've ever been involved in, right? Roland gasped and said, "Your Majesty, it can be regarded as a Tower of Babel." "Not really. It's just an ordinary high-rise building." Roland smiled and said, "But in this era, it's not excessive to regard it as a landmark." The height of 15 floors meant that it would be much higher than the castle. As long as one entered the territory of Neverwinter, he could see the high-rise building at a glance. It could not only symbolize the strength of Neverwinter but also make up for the current housing shortage. After all, the floor area ratio of high-rise houses was much higher than that of bungalows, which was why there were more and more skyscrapers in later generations. Can a house really be built so high? Carr looked a little doubtful. For concrete, this is far from the limit. Roland thought for a moment and said, "I'll guide you to finish it." Although different professions were worlds apart, mechanics and structural principles were still universal. Before coming up with this idea, he had considered many aspects. The height might seem amazing, but it was not. For example, the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was built more than 2,000 years before Christ, was more than 140 meters tall, and it was built purely of stone. China also had wooden pagodas that were more than 130 meters tall. As long as the support was thick enough, the height was not a problem. In the later generations, in order to save materials, the volume of the wall columns would be reduced as much as possible under the conditions of stability. Currently, Neverwinter had a surplus of cement production, so it was a good choice to use it to build a concrete tower. In addition, if the tower was designed with multiple podiums, although it would take up some extra land, it would greatly enhance the stability of the structure and reduce the construction difficulty. As the saying goes, if the structure is unstable, add more columns. If the level is not high enough, add steel bars. As long as the foundation is solid enough, it will be difficult for it to collapse. The last difficulty was the pouring of the concrete. Roland had already thought about this, which was to let Maggie carry the hummingbird into the air, and the hummingbird carry the iron cans to pour the concrete from the air. The efficiency was not much lower than that of the pump truck. Carr had the experience of building the Witch Building before. It was also a concrete structure, but this time, the scale was just a little larger. And when the time came, the bamboo and iron wires would be replaced with real steel bars. With the technical support of the Witch Union, he was full of confidence. "Time's up. Put down your pens," Scroll said, knocking on the table. "Phew." Evelyn breathed a long sigh of relief. In this way, the second semester in Border Town, no, in Neverwinter, was over. In this year, she had finally caught up with everyone's progress and participated in the final exam together. She put away the charcoal and looked around. Anna was still not present. According to Sister Vendi, she had reached a mysterious realm. Ordinary people who saw the books she read would only feel dizzy and drowsy, as if the magic of the whole body had been exhausted. Candle was also looking at her. When their eyes met, she gave her a thumbs up. It seemed that she had done a good job. Nightingale, who was sitting in the last row, still looked sad. Since there was no reading and writing test, her grades had plummeted, which made Evelyn quite puzzled. As far as she knew, Nightingale came from a noble background and received education earlier than most people, so she should not be so hard on her studies. After thinking about it, she could only think that it was because Nightingale's ability was too important. She was busy all day dealing with things for His Majesty, which delayed her studies. After all, Nightingale was a combat witch who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Lady Ashes. If she was on Sleeping Island, she would be an existence that Evelyn could only look up to. For example, Agatha, Lucia, and Lily, who were in the first row, always got high scores easily. Learning seemed to be an innate ability for them, especially Miss Agatha, who now had a tendency to get close to Anna and Tilly. In addition, she was also a combat witch, which made Evelyn very envious. Judging from the expressions of the few at the end, it could be guessed that Honey, Hummingbird, and Echo would be the ones who would take on the role. Of course, this did not include Paper and Summer, who had just joined the alliance. They still had not caught up with the progress and could only be taught by Teacher Scroll for the time being. But what excited Evelyn the most was Maggie. Looking at the dumbfounded little girl, she could not help but want to laugh. There were no multiple-choice questions in this exam. Since the results of the last final exam came out, Evelyn had been brooding over it. She thought that the goal she had set was very realistic, but she did not expect that she would still lose to Maggie by 1 point. For this reason, she even looked for Scroll to see if she had calculated the score incorrectly, only to find that Maggie's multiple-choice questions had an amazingly high accuracy rate, and she had lost indisputably. In the following year, Evelyn spent most of her free time studying. Her ability was very fast. She usually only needed to go to the winery 2 or 3 times a week, and each time, she would be able to release all her magic power in less than a quarter of an hour. Even after she opened a bar, it did not take too much time. She had never played with the 3-card players, and when she was in her free time, she would always open the exercise book to consolidate what she had learned in the evening. Even when it came to collecting her favorite perfume, Evelyn had restrained herself quite a bit. Only when a new scent of perfume was placed on the shelves would Evelyn invite Candle to stroll around the convenience market, all for the sake of achieving the goal she had set for herself. Chapter 666. 3 days later, Evelyn knew her final results. Out of the 150 marks on the comprehensive test paper, she got a delightful 113 points. According to her usual practice, this could be regarded as a superb performance. Since Scroll went to the Long Song area with His Majesty to check the work, it was Sister Vendi who informed her of the results. She also specially patted Evelyn on the shoulder and encouraged her with a smile. Good answer. Her Highness Tilly will be very happy to know this. Keep it up. I will continue to work hard. Evelyn nodded vigorously and turned back to find Candle. How many points did you get? 91 points, I finally passed, Candle said with a smile. Looking at your happy expression, you must have done very well, right? Yes. She couldn't help but raise the corner of her mouth. 113. Really? This score is probably close to that of Lucia and the others. Candle said in surprise, Do you want me to ask for you? No, they must have done better. Evelyn waved her hand. I only need to know Maggie's score. Perhaps the next target could be Lily or Lucia, she thought to herself. Her ability was indeed very poor, but it was inborn and she couldn't change it. Learning required hard work to make progress, and even an ordinary person could become charming. She didn't want to lose to anyone. She also wanted to be as knowledgeable and talented as His Majesty. After class, Evelyn found Maggie, but the other's answer made her unable to believe her ears. Coo, I got 117 points coo. How could this be? She was stunned and didn't come back to her senses until a long time after Maggie left. How is this possible? Did Scroll calculate her results wrongly? For a moment, Evelyn thought she heard her own voice. She blinked her eyes and found that the one who spoke was Mystery Moon, who happened to hear it and was also puzzled. What's impossible? Lily rolled her eyes at her. Don't doubt others just because you did poorly, okay? But I was sitting right in front of her, Mystery Moon argued. When I collected the papers, I saw that she had drawn honey jerky on a large blank space. Are you sure? Lily frowned. I guarantee it with my electromagnetic power. That's not convincing at all. She shrugged and turned to leave, but Mystery Moon pulled her back. Wait, I'm telling the truth. Why don't we investigate it? Not interested. Lily curled her lips. If you really find it strange, you can ask Scroll when she comes back. If that's the case, then there's no point in exploring. Mystery Moon looked as if she was eager to see the world in chaos. Evelyn, let us help you find out the truth. Don't count me in. What happened? Candlelight also came up to them. Evelyn hesitated for a moment before she confessed her confusion. Well, if you want to investigate, how should I do it? Candle touched Evelyn's head. Teacher Scroll will probably be gone for several days, right? Now that His Majesty and Nightingale are not here, I won't let you sneak into the office. Lily glared at Mystery Moon. Don't think I don't know what you want to do. Steal the papers? I'm not that stupid. Mystery Moon wagged her finger. I just need to find the place where Scroll reads the papers. You mean? Candle's eyes lit up. Just ask Summer, she said, smirking. Evelyn immediately understood Mystery Moon's plan. If Summer played back the illusion of Scroll grading Maggie, they could indeed find the answer to the question. But Teacher, Scroll usually reads the papers in City Hall. Isn't it inappropriate for us to go there? What's wrong with that? Everyone in Neverwinter can come and go freely. Of course, we can also go there, Mystery Moon shouted. It's not His Majesty's office, so someone doesn't have to worry about it. I have to remind you, Lily was unmoved. Ordinary people can only enter the lobby of City Hall. The office of the Ministry of Education is on the 2nd floor. Do you think those officials will let us go there at will? This. Mystery Moon was suddenly at a loss for words. If it doesn't work, then forget it. Evelyn wanted to retreat. She didn't want to cause trouble for everyone. I'll wait a few more days. No, I have a way that might solve it. Candle touched her chin and said. Candle's method was very simple. She just wanted to bring Nana along. According to her, since she had already called Summer, it didn't matter if she brought one more. And it turned out that this method was indeed effective. Evelyn was stunned by Nana Pine's popularity. The next day, as soon as she entered the City Hall, she was warmly greeted by everyone and no one stopped her from going anywhere. Perhaps because the image of the little angel was too deeply rooted in people's hearts, or because her father was a noble personally rewarded by His Majesty, she was quite famous in the border area. In short, they entered the office of the Ministry of Education effortlessly. The room was empty. Few teachers would come here unless there was a meeting. We're in, Mystery Moon said excitedly. Hurry up and start backtracking. Is this really okay? Summer said a little uneasily. This is a place that only officials can come. Officials are not rare. Hummingbird is the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Construction. Mystery Moon patted her chest. Don't worry. As long as we don't tell anyone, Scroll definitely won't mind us coming to her office. If the truth is that you're lying, I promise I'll tell Scroll. Lily snorted coldly. Didn't you say you wouldn't come? Ahem. I'm here to keep an eye on you to prevent you from making a big mistake, understand? Looking at the two arguing, Evelyn suddenly felt that her decision might have been a mistake. In the end, it was Candle who persuaded Summer. When the illusion appeared in the office, everyone held their breath. It was obvious that Scroll's marking time was between the end of the exam and the day she went to Longsong Academy. She quickly found the scene with the help of the fast playback. Everyone squeezed behind Scroll at the same time. As long as the time was not too long, Summer could maintain the illusion for half an hour. After a while, Evelyn saw Maggie's paper. See, I didn't lie. Mystery Moon shouted. Lily could not help but frown. There was indeed a large blank space on the paper. Except for the relatively easy fill-in-the-blank questions and question-and-answer questions, there was almost no word written on the latter part of the paper that involved calculation. Moreover, there were pictures of barbecued meat under some of the questions. Even Scroll could not help but shake her head. Obviously, this answer paper could not have scored 117 points. Chapter 667. Scroll quickly scanned through the entire test paper, and then wrote down the total score of the 3 subjects at the head of the paper, 17 points. It was a full 100 points lower than the final result. Well, it seems that the problem lies with Maggie? Nana tilted her head. Hey, is that the result? Mystery Moon was greatly disappointed. Isn't it Scroll who deliberately protected Maggie and used the condition of getting a high score in exchange for honey barbecue? Ouch. Lily slapped the back of her head. Shut up. Do you want to continue reading? Summer asked timidly. Let's leave here as soon as possible. It would be terrible if we were discovered. Wait a little longer, Candle said in a low voice. Maybe there was something wrong when copying. No, I already know the result. That's enough. Evelyn shook her head. If it was written in the original way, It was indeed possible to confuse the tightly arranged numbers. However, in the universal education implemented by His Majesty, the numbers had been replaced with simple and easy-to-remember characters, so the probability of making a mistake was too small. I think Maggie flew in from the window. The dirty stuff. Mystery Moon covered her head. Don't do it. I won't say anything. Scroll checked all the test papers and began to copy the scores until everyone's scores were gathered on a table. The score in Maggie's column was still 17 points. It seems that it's really not Teacher Scroll's problem, Kendall sighed softly. Can we go now? Summer said anxiously. Evelyn was about to answer when Scroll suddenly stood up and looked in the direction of the door. The 6 people immediately followed her gaze and then noticed that the door had been opened and a City Hall apprentice appeared in front of the office. What are they talking about? Mystery Moon asked. The illusion had no voice, so everyone could only judge their conversation by the movement of their lips. It seems that Lady Scroll, His Excellency Barov, is looking for you? Then, Scroll nodded and followed the apprentice out of the office. At the moment when the door was closed, perhaps because of the airflow, a cold wind suddenly rolled up in the room, blowing up all the test papers and scattering them messily on the floor. The window. Lily was startled. Evelyn also saw it. The window that was originally closed was now opened a small gap. It could only be said that Scroll didn't close the window properly, and the airflow generated by the opening and closing of the door caused the window to crack open. As the autumn wind blew, the window swayed back and forth, opening wider and wider. Not long after, another strong gust of wind smashed it back into the window frame. Although no sound could be heard, it was obvious that the force of the impact was not small from the way the glass shook. A jaw-dropping scene occurred. A gust of wind swept through the office again, scraping the pen holder onto the table. The quill knocked against the mouth of the ink bottle and flew up, landing right on the result sheet. The tip of the quill was the first to touch the ground. It brushed past the grid with Maggie's score, leaving a short vertical line. The original score of 17 became a 3-digit 117. Someone probably heard the loud noise coming from the office, for the door was pushed open again. The apprentice who left with the notice first looked around, and then walked in surprise. She went to the window, closed all the windows, and then squatted down to tidy up the office for Scroll. She didn't leave until all the documents were rearranged and neatly placed on the desk. Satisfied, she tiptoed away. Is that what happened? Evelyn and Kendall looked at each other. It was not a mistake in the book, nor was it Maggie's deliberate deceit, but was caused by an accidental wind? Evelyn could already guess what happened next. Scroll received His Majesty's order to go to Longsong and handed the result sheet to Vendi. Vendi wasn't the examiner, so even if she was confused about Maggie's score, she wouldn't question Scroll's judgment. Under Mystery Moon's persistence, the truth has finally been discovered. Mystery Moon looked up and said, "The culprit is Teacher Scroll." "It's the wind," Lily said, gnashing her teeth. But if Scroll had closed the window, the wind wouldn't have messed up the papers and blown away the quill, right? How could you say that? No, Nana said thoughtfully. If that's the case, it should be His Highness Roland's fault. He built the new City Hall here. Not only did he expand it, but he also added 2 more floors. Without this extra second floor, Scroll couldn't have judged the papers here. You're right, so the culprit is His Majesty? That's enough. Excuse me. Can I finish now? Summer looked so anxious that she was about to cry. Sorry, it's enough. Evelyn patted her on the shoulder. Thank you. Let's go. Hey, are we leaving now? Maybe we can find the papers for the next quiz in Scroll's office? Mystery Moon stopped in front of everyone. This is your real purpose of coming here. Lily rushed forward. I won't let you mess around. I was just saying. In the end, the investigation ended like a farce. After saying goodbye to Kendall, Evelyn returned to the witch building alone. Although the truth had come to light, she could not calm down at all. For some reason, the flying paper and the falling quill kept appearing in her mind. Their trajectories were irregular, but at the last moment, they formed a clever and perfect result. Not only the paper and the quill, but also the airflow caused by the door and the time taken by the apprentices in and out all played a part in the result. Without any of these conditions, the score could not be changed. However, these conditions were unconscious and chaotic. So, it was the same for bartending. When adding various ingredients to the wine, one could not taste each taste in turn when tasting it. They fused and influenced each other in the wine. Every taste that could be accepted by people needed countless attempts, and sometimes a coincidental combination would create a unique taste. Evelyn could not help but think of the microscopic spheres that His Majesty had mentioned. They were always making disorderly disturbances, each seemingly unrelated, but as a whole, they could show wonderful characteristics. She closed her eyes and felt that something was about to come out of her heart. The world was full of chaos. But the result was hidden in the chaos. It was as if it was predestined. Evelyn suddenly opened her eyes and reached for the glass of water on the table. The cold water that had been left for a day rippled, and then the color changed, as if a drop of paint had been poured into it. The water gradually turned into an orange-red color, and a fragrance that she had never smelled before floated into her nose. She hesitated for a moment, and then stuck out her tongue to lick it. An indescribable sweetness suddenly filled the tip of her tongue. It was slightly astringent, but the rich and mellow sweetness was incomparable to any kind of drink. It was like a mixture of juice and milk, but also like a mixture of tea and honey. Evelyn could not accurately describe the taste, but she was sure of one thing. Chapter 668. A week later, Roland returned to the border area from Longsong Stronghold. As soon as he entered the castle, he received 2 pieces of good news. The first one was from Barav. Your Majesty, the astrologers from the Old King's City have arrived in Neverwinter 3 days ago. Together with craftsmen, apprentices, and their families, there are 312 of them. I've arranged for the 9 astrologers to stay in the Foreign Affairs building and the others to stay in the reception area. They're finally here. Roland thought for a moment and then ordered, hold a welcome banquet in the square in the evening. I want to let the people know that there's another school of sages in Neverwinter. Like alchemy, astrology had a high reputation among the people. Generally, only the King's City would have both of them. Now that all the Astrology Association had gone to the Western region, it was easier for people to accept Neverwinter as the new King's City. However, Roland did not need this school of astrology. What he really wanted was the astrologers' ability to calculate. They were definitely at the forefront of mathematics in this era. Whether it was calculating the calendar or estimating the orbit of the stars, they needed a lot of calculation. With the relevant knowledge of intermediate and advanced mathematics, they would undoubtedly be able to further improve their original foundation. He planned to set up a school of mathematics so that these people could devote all their time to calculation except for the occasional observation of the star of extinction. In this era without computers, it was the most efficient choice for many scholars to complete some complex calculations together. Whether it was laying rails, building large ships, installing Longsong cannons on the mountains, or writing shooting manuals, he would need their help. Yes, Your Majesty. Barav nodded and then asked, May I know about your trip to Longsong? There were a lot of problems. Facing the director of City Hall, Roland did not need to hide it. The second-level City Hall of Longsong has been found to have malfeasance and corruption. Scroll found a lot of falsified accounts. Even among the batch of officials transferred from the border area, she caught 2 embezzlers. Hearing this, Barav could not help but swallow his saliva. Are they my disciples? Roland was amused by the other party's cautious look. He shook his head helplessly. Even if they are your disciples, I won't blame you. Don't worry. Your Majesty is wise, said Barav hastily. Then are they the subjects of the old town? Yes, the second batch of graduates passed the examination and entered the City Hall. Then they were transferred to the Longsong area along with the whole team. Roland sighed. It's been less than a year since then. At present, City Hall had trained a group of semi-leaders. One of them was the Longsong district, which was almost completely copied from Border Town. With the addition of the local honeysuckle Perot, the elk wren, and some minor nobles, the Longsong district had everything except for the slightly smaller number of people. The other half was the batch that went to Fallen Dragon bounty. Besides assisting Countess Spear to maintain the political situation, their secondary task was to try to establish the framework of a secondary city hall. As the Northern Region scholars brought back by Edith Kant participated in the administrative study of the city hall, Roland might be able to find another half in a short period of time. He had already reserved this group of people for the southernmost region. The most scarce talent was undoubtedly the local officials who could carry out his edict. Without them as the foundation, even if Roland conquered the entire Grey Castle, he would not be able to quickly centralize the kingdom's resources. The local government was an important part of the centralization of power. He could use the witches to quickly advance the level of science and technology, but he could not create a large number of middle-level and grassroots officials out of thin air. Those feudal nobles would never obey his orders obediently. In the eyes of the feudalists, the only important thing was the land they occupied. Therefore, every person with administrative experience was a rare treasure. Now that he had lost several people, Roland naturally felt a little depressed. Although the corruption of the organization was inevitable, he thought it could at least last for more than a decade. He did not expect such a problem to occur in just 1 year. And the two greedy people were both civilians, which in a way proved that once they had power, they might be more likely to lose their way than the nobles. Those who violated the law, they were punished severely. Roland spread out his hands and said, "To set an example for others." This should be able to last for a few more years. With the ability of Nightingale and Scroll, it was not a problem to temporarily maintain the integrity of the organization. But he also knew that this could not continue, otherwise the witches would be easily pushed to the teeth of the storm again, and the next enemy would come from within. Tomorrow, gather all the people in the city hall in the castle hall. I will personally hold a short meeting with them to talk about the importance of discipline and responsibility. Of course, there would also be rewards and punishments. In the face of the high pressure and broad prospects of the battle of divine will, they should know how to choose. "Yes, Your Majesty." Barav bowed. Looking at the back of the old director, Roland was satisfied and took a sip of tea. He knew the purpose of Barav's loyalty, to pursue power while enjoying the satisfaction of power itself, and at the same time, to better use power. Barav was undoubtedly a person who was very suitable for the new political system. Perhaps in the future, in the city hall, only he could compete with Edith. The second piece of good news came from Vendi. Evelyn's ability has evolved? Roland was slightly surprised when he heard the news. In his impression, Evelyn's various magic indicators were very balanced and did not seem outstanding. He did not expect that she would become the first witch on Sleeping Island to evolve, which was really a surprise to him. Agatha has confirmed this, but... Vendi smiled bitterly. After the evolution, her ability is too strange. I don't know how to describe it. Bring her to see me in the office, he said with great interest. Evelyn walked into the 3rd floor of the castle with several glass bottles. Roland noticed that each bottle contained a liquid of different colors. Her magic power looks like a gray ball. Nightingale's voice came into his ears. But the shape is not fixed. What about the total magic power? The degree of growth is good. Currently, it's between Leaf and Agatha. Roland nodded and looked at Evelyn. What's in it? The drinks I created with my ability these days. Her tone seemed a little depressed. They taste different, and I can't control the final result. The only thing in common is that they can all be drunk. Drinks? Roland's curiosity could not be suppressed. He found a few teacups and poured himself a cup of each. When he took the first sip of the light blue drink, he tasted an indescribable delicacy. It was like a mixture of many kinds of fruit juices, with a trace of refreshing coldness. Chapter 669. The next few drinks were an eye-opener for Roland. Some were like coffee, slightly bitter but emitting a strong fragrance. Some were like soup, delicious and warm the stomach. The most unique one was one that he could not even remember. If he had to name it, he could only make up a word to name it: fire dragon wine. It was not the wine made from dragon fruit, but the dragon flame in his imagination. When it entered the mouth, there was a burning sensation, as if lava had rushed into the mouth. Then there was a scorching smell, as if his tongue had been roasted. Finally, there was a juicy fruit fragrance, mixed with the slightly intoxicating taste of wine. The longer it was kept in the mouth, the longer the aftertaste. If it was in winter, it would definitely be an irresistible drink. Probably seeing Roland's intoxicated expression, Nightingale could not help but show herself, licking her lips and asking, "Your Majesty, is it really that good?" "Try it and you'll know." Roland handed the cup to her. Soon, Nightingale hummed with satisfaction, and her eyes narrowed into slits. "I've tasted it." Vendi showed a sympathetic expression. "Its taste is really irresistible." After drinking all the fire dragon wine, Roland burped unwillingly. "Is there any more of this drink?" Evelyn shook her head. "I can't repeat the result last time. The new ability is completely irregular." "Can't repeat it?" Roland was a little startled. After Vendi explained the test in detail, he finally understood why she was distressed. This ability could turn water, wine, or other liquids into drinks, but it could not control which kind of drink it was. In other words, the finished product was different every time. It consumed much more magic power than the conversion of alcohol. It could only be used once a day, and the amount it could convert was quite limited, almost equal to the capacity of a wine barrel. Roland had seen the round wooden barrels in taverns, which could store about 1 cubic meter of wine. So far, Evelyn had used the new ability 5 times, and got 5 different drinks with different flavors. At the thought of not knowing when he could drink the fire dragon wine again, or maybe never again, Roland felt full of regret. This was probably the reason why Evelyn was disappointed. For witches, the High Awakening could be regarded as a new life, and even had the opportunity to jump from a non-combat witch to a combat witch. Although he repeatedly stressed that every witch's ability had great potential, Evelyn, who came from Sleeping Island, still could not completely change her mind. Roland knew that she had always thought that her brewing skills were terrible. Now that she had finally evolved, her new ability didn't change fundamentally. She just changed from wine to more drinks, and she couldn't even control the result. She was even more depressed. He did not have a good solution to this. It usually took time to change stereotypes. When a large number of assistant witches shone in Neverwinter, the witch's mentality would naturally change. But he absolutely did not think that this ability was useless. The Age of Great Voyages, which started in the pursuit of spices, and the Silk Road, which flourished because of the trade of porcelain and silk, all proved that people had a demand and desire for luxury goods. These drinks were indisputable luxury goods: the exquisite taste, the unique feeling, and the beauty that added a touch of brilliance to this boring world. No matter which era it was in, it would be sought after by people. And it almost cost nothing. For example, if the fire dragon wine was sold to the fjords and other kingdoms, it would not be strange to exchange it for the same weight of a golden dragon. There would always be some rich merchants and nobles who had too much money to spend who would pay for it. As for the war caused by greed for luxury goods, they should be thankful that Roland did not rob them. Robbing Neverwinter was no different from committing suicide. Evelyn was undoubtedly a moving mountain of gold. Moreover, trade was not the only use of the drinks. Historical experience had taught him that things that were widely loved by the masses could often play a role in spreading culture and ideas. In addition, in the arduous war years, if the soldiers fighting on the outer edge of the impassable mountain range could drink a bag of drinks transported from Neverwinter to the front, it would definitely greatly boost the morale of the army. It could strengthen the unity of the people and stabilize the confidence of the people to fight against the battle of divine will. In the future, in addition to alcohol, no high alcohol conversion, I'll specially build a drink storage for you, Roland said decisively. You can use all the remaining magic power on the new ability. I believe that everyone who drinks it will be fascinated by it. Okay. Your Majesty. Although Evelyn agreed, she still looked a little doubtful. She did not realize her own value. But Roland did not say what he thought in his heart. He knew that as long as he continued to do it, Evelyn would see the changes brought about by her chaotic power sooner or later. As for their names, let's call them chaos drinks, Roland said with a smile. After the welcome banquet in the evening, Astrologer of Dispersion Star walked into the study of His Majesty. He had served 3 Wimbledon kings. Including Roland Wimbledon, Dispersion Star was the 4th king. And Roland was also the king that puzzled him the most. Putting aside the ridiculous and frivolous rumors in the capital, this young ruler always gave him an unfathomable feeling. It was not that he was arrogant, nor was he pretending to be profound. It was as if his way of thinking was beyond the scope of an ordinary person, leaving him at a loss as to what to do. That reply was the best proof of that. Astrologer of Dispersion Star had never seen a king so indifferent to the news of the star of extinction. Half of the letter was a greeting and the other half was an invitation for the Astrology Association to move to the western region. The letter also claimed that there was a better astronomical telescope here, which could fully meet the needs of stargazing. At the end of the letter, Roland unhurriedly mentioned that Neverwinter had found new clues about the bloody moon and needed to discuss with the astrologers. Roland read the whole letter without surprise or fear, as if he had casually answered, "Oh, I see." Actually, even when Roland Wimbledon first appeared in the observatory and learned about the existence of the star of extinction, he was not too surprised. Even though it was a blessing for the people to have such a calm and collected king, the feeling of not receiving too much attention when his lifelong pursuit had finally been realized was still a little uncomfortable. The room was brightly lit. His Majesty was writing something, and the table was covered with thick documents. Dispersion Star had not seen such a scene for a long time. "Good evening, Your Majesty." He bowed with a slight sense of relief. "The Astrology Association sends its greetings to you." Chapter 670. Is it about the prophecy of the bloody moon? Dispersion Star sat down and asked. "That's part of it. Since you mentioned it, let's start with it." The young king smiled and poured him a cup of tea. This action made the scholar feel quite flattered. Compared to the few times he had met Timothy, Roland was undoubtedly much more approachable. The rumor about the bloody moon started more than 1,000 years ago. At that time, there was neither Grey Castle nor Wimbledon. But Your Majesty, the history of the bloody moon has only been recorded for more than 450 years. It's not that there are no records, but that it's been deliberately concealed. Roland changed into a more comfortable position in his chair. "There's still a long time. Let me tell you slowly." Then, the scholar heard an incredible and shocking story. It crossed the uninhabited barbarian land and traced back to the land of Dawn more than 1,000 years ago. It told him about the endless war between humans and demons, the symbol of the bloody moon and the Witch Empire, and the origin of the 4 kingdoms and the church. If it was not the king who told him this, he would have called it absurd. However, Roland did not look like he was joking at all. When Roland finished his speech, Dispersion Star found it hard to breathe. He had always thought that the doomsday was a divine punishment from the gods, the rising of huge waves in the sea, the shaking of the earth, and the intermingling of underground fire and heavenly thunder. Although it was terrible, it was not enough to destroy all human beings. As long as preparations were made in advance, a considerable part of the city could be saved. However, according to His Majesty, the bloody moon was the signal of the demons' attack. Moreover, humans had failed twice in this conquest that lasted for thousands of years. If they failed again, they would be completely wiped out. "Your Majesty." Dispersion Star's voice became hoarse. "Where did you learn all this?" "The Witch Empire and the Church." Roland stretched out 2 fingers. "The establishment of the 4 kingdoms was related to them, and Grey Castle is no exception. In addition, I've dealt with demons in the west of the western region. They have their own civilization and army. They are a veritable alien race." "Then, what is the smile of the gods?" "No one knows. Maybe we'll find the answer after the battle of divine will." Dispersion Star fell silent. He did not know whether he should believe this horrifying story or not. However, he soon realized that this was related to the survival of Grey Castle and the continuity of the Wimbledon family. As a king, Roland would not deceive him, because it was meaningless. If he took this as the truth, it would explain His Majesty's attitude towards the witches. If their power did not come from the demons, they would naturally not be the enemy of humans. From the looks of it, the rumors circulating in the old king's city about the innocence of witches was only a small part of the truth that had surfaced. His Majesty did not release all the information, but carefully hid the facts that could easily cause panic. This was undoubtedly the right and wise decision. He still could not understand how the bloody moon in the sky had anything to do with the gate of hell. "Your Majesty, what can I do for you?" Dispersion Star vaguely realized that the reason why the king asked the Astrology Association to move to the western region several times was probably not for astrology. He knew more about the Star of Extinction than the astrologers. If he did not tell Dispersion Star this secret, he would never be able to imagine what had happened 1,000 years ago. This is the second question I want to talk to you about. It's even more important than the first one. Roland smiled and handed him a book. "Take a look at this first." Dispersion Star took the book and found that the title on the cover was a row of words that he had never seen before. Analytic, geometry? It was hard to pronounce, and the pigment used for the title was blue. Such a smooth and delicate indigo was not cheap. Just flip through it. It doesn't matter if you don't understand it. There are still many things you need to learn in the future. Dispersion Star did not want to read at night. Although there were no candles in His Majesty's room and the light source above his head was very stable, it was still not as bright as during the day. Stargazers needed to protect their eyes the most. However, since Roland was the king, it was not appropriate for him to refuse. Therefore, he pretended to skim through the book and read it carefully the next day. However, after flipping to the first page and glancing at the preface, he forgot his original idea. Describing the trajectory of an object with an arithmetic formula? As long as you know the key parameters, you can calculate the whole trajectory? Next was a row of horizontal and vertical intersecting lines. Each intersecting pattern had a simple figure drawn on it. Some were a straight line, some were a curve, some were an ellipse, and some were a multi-segment curve. They did not look strange at first glance, but Dispersion Star's eyes were attracted by the arithmetic formula on one side of the figure. It should be an arithmetic formula. Dispersion Star thought to himself. It had a plus sign and an equal sign, which began and ended with the same symbol. Although he could not understand it, he felt it was inexplicably wonderful. This sense of harmony seemed to be innate, and each symbol had its own unique charm. For example, a straight line and an ellipse could not be regarded as a kind of trajectory, but there was not much difference in their arithmetic formulas. Suddenly, an irrepressible thought arose in his mind. Could it be that all the figures in the world can be represented by an arithmetic formula? Excited, the scholar could not wait to turn to the second page. When Dispersion Star closed the book, he found that his neck was sore and numb. Obviously, he had been reading for more than an hour. His Majesty did not disturb him, but continued to write the manuscript at hand with a very serious look. "Sorry, Your Majesty, I..." "Finished reading?" Roland looked up and smiled. "There are many parts that you can't understand, right?" "Yes, the symbols and expressions on it are not the ones taught in the palace." 9 out of 10 palace mentors came from the Astrology Association, but what His Majesty had written was completely beyond his imagination. "It's very interesting, but I really can't figure out the mutual changes of the calculation formulas," Roland said. "Because you haven't touched the equations, you have to learn these first if you want to understand the analytical part." The king pulled out a stack of books from the table and handed them to Dispersion Star as if he was performing a magic trick. Some of the titles were blue, some were green, and the names were weird and hard to pronounce. Dispersion Star's hands trembled slightly. "Can I take them back and read them?" "Of course," Roland nodded. "In fact, not only you, but I hope that all astrologers and apprentices can learn these contents together." He paused for a moment. "The second thing I want to say is this. You don't have to worry too much about the bloody moon. Only by mastering all of them can the Astrology Association play an irreplaceable role in the war against the demons in the future. This part of the book is just an introduction, and there are more profound contents in the later parts. Not only the trajectories, but also the grass and trees, the stars in the sky, and everything you see. What do you think? Are you willing to accept it? I'm willing, Your Majesty. Astrologer of Dispersion Star had long since forgotten about the Star of Extinction and agreed without hesitation. He seemed to see the scene of thousands of stars moving according to his handwriting. The young king also revealed a smile. That smile was a little strange. For some reason, it reminded him of a hunter watching his prey fall into a trap. Chapter 671. Ever since number 76 became Yorko's maid, he had less and less fun with Denise. It was not because he had a new lover that he had forgotten his old one, but because he had to spend time taking care of the poor guide. Black Money was not joking when it said that she would be punished. When the supervisor, Silver Mask, brought her here, she was covered with whip marks and bruises, which made her look completely different from half a day ago. Yorko was glad that he had made this request in time. Otherwise, number 76 would have been beaten to a pulp. That was why Silver Mask said that she could no longer serve as a guide. Of course, customers would not allow a handicapped person to serve them. Fortunately, number 76's body was quite strong and not as weak as that of ordinary women, especially her abdomen and back, where he could still see the shallow muscle lines. After applying medicine, she recovered quickly and was now able to take care of the chores in the house, including some personal services. Just like today. Your Excellency, do you need me to massage your shoulders? Number 76 came over after cleaning the house and sat beside Yorko with a smile. According to the rules, a maid was not allowed to approach the master without the master's permission. Obviously, number 76 was still pleasing the guest in the way that Black Money had trained her. However, Yorko did not care at all. On the contrary, he liked this kind of active and enthusiastic teasing. If she was just a maid who followed the rules and followed her master's orders, then it would be too boring. Sit down. He put down the unofficial history and lay down on the bench. Number 76 also took off her shoes, bent her knees and let him rest his head on her thighs. Then she pressed her slender and powerful fingers on his shoulders and slowly massaged them. Compared to those women who flirted rather than massaged, her strength was much heavier and her technique was much richer. Obviously, after a period of hard training, she could really relieve fatigue. Lying on her thighs, Yorko could clearly see number 76's face. After Black Money sent her here, she naturally did not need to wear the copper mask to hide her identity. To be honest, number 76 was not a particularly beautiful woman. Her facial features were just above average, let alone compared with witches. But those red lips were just right. Especially when he looked up from below, the curved corners of her mouth especially aroused his interest. What was more wonderful was her figure. It was the first time that Yorko had experienced a woman with such power. She was not as plump as most noble women, nor as thin as poor girls. Her well-proportioned limbs, supple skin, and curvaceous chest and abdomen. When she tightened her body, he could feel the slight bulge of her firm muscles. For someone like him who loved new things, this was much more attractive than pure appearance. The door was pushed open when Yorko was about to go further with her. It was Hillfox who walked in. Well, the time for fun had come to an end. He sighed and sat up. This time I won't have to redeem another witch, will I? Hill did not answer but looked at number 76. The latter tactfully bowed and quickly left the room. He's just a servant. Yorko shrugged. You're too cautious. The situation in the Kingdom of Dawn is not stable. It's better to be careful at this time. Whether in terms of reputation or family background, Denise is much more powerful than number 76. Why don't I see you being so cautious about her? Because Denise Payton is a public figure. She can be investigated through various means, but a guide trained by Black Money can't be investigated. Hill sat down opposite him and placed a letter on the coffee table in the middle of the room. But I think I've found out her background. Yorko smiled proudly. Do you want to hear it? Oh. Hill raised his eyebrows. Tell me. It seemed that even the personal guard assigned by an old friend was not omniscient and omnipotent. He grinned. It takes a lot of time to train such a well-trained guide. Whether it's her skills in serving guests or her obviously tempered body, it's impossible to reach this level without more than 10 years of training. It has become her instinct to please and serve the customers. And how old is she now? About 21 or 22. No more than 25. That's right. That is to say, number 76 was about 5 or 6 years old before she received these training. Unless she's an immortal monster, it's unlikely that she comes from a force other than black money. Yorko spread out his hands. Black money has nothing to do with us. The things they do are much scarier than buying slaves and protecting witches, which we haven't achieved yet. He laughed at himself. Witches don't need our protection. Seeing that Hill Fox had nothing to say, Yorko suddenly felt refreshed. He picked up the letter on the table and opened it. After a few glances, he frowned. It turned out to be an official diplomatic letter sent in the name of His Majesty. And the content of the letter made Yorko tremble with fear. The King of Grey Castle wants to stop the King of Dawn from persecuting witches? Yorko felt that he could not wrap his head around it. This is the capital of the Kingdom of Dawn, not the western region of Grey Castle. Does my old friend think that Appen Moya will listen to me? Not to mention the series of threats that followed. For example, do not go against the times, the crumbling church is the best proof. And, Grey Castle will not sit idly by and will reserve the right to take the next step, hoping that the new king will take care of himself. Although the wording was very euphemistic, Yorko believed that no one in the palace was a fool. Hill Fox was basically saying that if Grey Castle did not do what Grey Castle said, the Kingdom of Dawn would be Grey Castle's next enemy. How could he say such words in front of the King of Dawn? Yorko handed the letter to Hill with a gloomy face. He felt restless, and the joy of winning the debate was gone. The guard was right. For His Majesty, witches were much more important than the Covenant. But what else could this kind of threat do besides provoking the disgust of the nobles in the Kingdom of Dawn? A threat that could not be fulfilled was destined to become a laughing stock. What should I do? Hill was the only one who could give him advice now. Do as His Majesty says. Hill quickly finished reading the letter. This is your duty as an ambassador. As for Appen Moya's reaction, I guess he will at most throw thunder and drive you out of the palace. There won't be any other danger. Then the relationship we built with the other nobles will be over, Yorko said gloomily. The big families in the city of Glow will definitely laugh at us as lunatics, and Roland will also become the new topic of conversation at the banquet. What good will this kind of empty threat do to His Majesty? Empty threat? Hill said noncommittally. Do you really think His Majesty is just saying that? Yorko's heart suddenly trembled. He looked at the guard in disbelief. This is not possible. Chapter 672. Yorko made a request to the King of Dawn to attend the court meeting the next day. Probably because they had just signed a peace treaty, his request was quickly approved. 2 knights in exquisite armor welcomed him into the palace hall. 2 or 3 months ago, he had requested to see His Majesty many times, but all of his requests went unanswered. Now he hoped that His Majesty Appen would turn a blind eye to his requests as he had done in the past. Unfortunately, the reality was always so unsatisfactory. The court meeting was obviously coming to an end when he walked into the hall. The young king was leaning on the throne and talking cheerfully with his ministers. Appen only sat up straight when he saw Yorko bend his knees to salute him. No need to be so polite. I heard that you brought a letter from Roland Wimbledon? Yes, Your Majesty, Yorko braced himself to reply. He congratulated you on your coronation and hoped that the friendship between the two countries could continue for a long time. That's a novel statement. Appen Moya smiled. Did he prepare any gifts? Well, of course, the ambassador said with a quick wit. The fleet of gifts is still on the way. This letter was sent here by a fast horse. I remember that during the coronation of Wimbledon III, My father sent a team of 200 people to Grey Castle. There were 11 carriages loaded with gifts, including gold wares, fine wine, silk satins, and beautiful women. I don't know what Roland's gift will be this time. I'm looking forward to it. There was a burst of laughter among the ministers. Was there such a thing? Yorko could not help but feel a little thirsty. Why didn't the letter mention anything about the gifts? It was understandable that he did not know, but it was unlikely that His Majesty did not know. Did he say anything else? Appin asked. For a moment, Yorko even wanted to leave. However, when he thought that if he offended the King of Dawn, he would at most be rejected by the nobles in King City. If he disappointed His Majesty, he might have to replace him as the ambassador. Therefore, he resisted the urge. His Majesty, I also hope you'll stop persecuting witches and treat them like free people. Yorko gritted his teeth and said, otherwise, Grey Castle won't turn a blind eye to this kind of behavior. The church is the best example. After he finished speaking, the hall instantly quietened down. The ambassador could feel sweat beading on his forehead. Did Roland Wimbledon really say that? After a while, Appin Moya said, show me the letter. Immediately, a knight came to Yorko and grabbed the parchment in his hand. Even though he did not dare to look into the King of Dawn's eyes, he could tell that the King of Dawn's tone had become colder. Thinking of the condemnation and warning that occupied most of the letter, Yorko felt like crying on the spot. As expected, Appin threw the letter to the ground after reading it. Is this how Grey Castle treats its allies? Witches are innocent, so I have to let them go? Nonsense. The young king seemed to be unable to control his emotions. He stood up from the throne and said with a murderous look, look at what those damned witches have done to the Moya family. They invaded the palace, slaughtered the guards, and threatened me with my father's life to obey the church. If it wasn't for the poison they gave my father, he would still be sitting here in one piece. But you can only ascend the throne if he dies, right? However, Yorko only dared to say this in his mind. Your Majesty, please calm down. As far as I know, the witches trained by the church are not the same as other innocent people, just like ordinary people are also divided into. Shut up. Appin scolded. You have no idea how terrible those who have mastered the power of demons are. Even God's stone can't completely restrain them. Tell me, how can a group of people who are not bound by any rules obey us? Without the witches, the Kingdom of Dawn will only be more stable. I'm responsible for my people. It was impossible to reason with him. Yorko realized that his father had become a shadow in his heart when he saw Roland's flushed cheeks. This guy was about the same age as Roland, but he was almost the same age as his old friend in the King's City, or maybe even worse. Look at His Majesty, who had been away from King's City for less than a year, but had already transformed into a real superior, while this guy was still under his father's protection. I'll write a letter to the King of Grey Castle and tell him not to be tempted by those fallen witches. Threatening the Kingdom of Dawn for the devil's minions? That's ridiculous. Appin walked back and forth angrily. Grey Castle may be powerful, but he shouldn't forget who gave him the power. Without the support of the nobles, how could Roland deploy his army to the Kingdom of Dawn? If he invades the royal territory for this reason, he'll definitely treat his vassals in the same way in the future. Not only will my subjects resist to the end, but the nobles of Grey Castle will also not support him as they did against the church. My old friend seems to have done that, Yorko thought. Although he did not know how His Majesty defeated the church, he vaguely remembered that His Majesty did not rely on the nobles when he attacked King's City. At that time, few people in Grey Castle thought that Prince Wimbledon would win. Moreover, in the subsequent trial, almost all the great nobles were caught. Otherwise, he would not have been able to get the position of ambassador. In the end, as Hill had predicted, Appin Moya, who could not restrain his anger, drove him out of the palace. Fortunately, to Yorko's relief, none of the other ministers responded to the king, although they were surprised. Their reaction was much better than he had expected. Of course, when they saw the letter that was thrown to the ground, it was inevitable that they would laugh at him behind his back. As soon as he returned to his residence, Otto Luashi followed him. Does His Majesty really think this way? Otherwise, I wouldn't lie to you. Yorko collapsed on the bench and said, "Why, are you here to laugh at me?" "No. I just think that Appin's new policy is a bit impulsive. He really wants the people of the Kingdom of Dawn to live a stable life, but this kind of search and arrest method will make people panic. Then you should talk to him. He doesn't listen." Otto smiled bitterly. He's like a different person when it comes to witches. But you can't blame him. If you've witnessed the changes in the palace with your own eyes. He bit his lip and said, "No, it's nothing. His Majesty Moya's death was a huge blow to Appin. According to his age, he should have inherited the throne in another 5 or 6 years. I heard that Wimbledon III was also killed by the witches of the church. On this point, if only he could be as steady as His Majesty." Yorko looked at Otto in surprise. Why did he have a feeling that Otto was not the eldest son of one of the 3 big families in the Kingdom of Dawn, but a noble of Greycastle? Was His Majesty really so prestigious that he could make the nobles of neighboring countries stand on his side? Anyway, I'll find another chance to talk to Appin. Now he doesn't even listen to Earl Quinn's words. After finishing his tea, Otto got up and was about to leave when number 76 suddenly ran into the room. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."